boys.
It's the BOYSCAST.
The lads.
It's the BOYSCAST.
The dudes.
Prepare yourself for BOYSCAST.
The bros.
It's the BOYSCAST.
The homies.
It's the BOYSCASt.
The dudes.
Experience the BOYSCAST.
BOYSCAST.
In the studio with Rob Henderson. Let's go.
What's happening?
Go. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Very good.
So you're in New York, eh?
I'm in New York. I moved here about 8.5, 9 months ago.
We actually said, because we knew you were in the Army, we were like, this guy's going to be on time.
Yeah. Because we had some guests who were... Oh, did I turn yours up?
No, I was like 4 or 5 minutes late.
But no, that's what I'm saying. You texted me saying I'm going to be 5 minutes late, which is like, that's such an Army move.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, so a lot of my military friends, I was in the Air Force, so they would be upset if I just went along with Army. You know, there's that intra-service rivalry thing, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine. So I was in the Air Force, to be clear. But, you know, I've been out long enough that I'm kind of used to people just, Army, whatever, sort of a catch-all phrase, catch-all term.
Could you fly a private plane?
No. So this is something that is widely misunderstood. So the Air Force, only 4% of the Air Force are actually pilots, and the other 96% of Air Force members. yeah. There's a few of those, but then you got mechanics, technicians, radar operators, people serving food in the dining halls. It's a whole operation.
Yeah.
So you got the pilots doing that, but then there are way more people who are repairing the airplanes than actually flying them.
So what'd you do?
Yeah, I was one of the guys repairing radars, missile warning systems, that kind of thing. I was like the Air Force kind of glorified version of a cable guy. I'd have my little tools and equipment.
You're just like when you see the planes, you're just like, couldn't have done it without me.
Yeah. Exactly.
It wasn't for us. They wouldn't even be up there.
I thought that every day.
And you were like 17, right? Didn't you say you were like actually kind of, you had to get a waiver to go in because it was so early?
Yeah. This is, so I was 17 years old, and you can enlist when you're 17, but you need to get a special document signed by a parent or guardian. And I was 17 when I graduated from high school, and so I had to talk to my adoptive mom about letting me enlist, and she hemmed and hawed. But as I explained in the book, there weren't many options for me after high school, and she understood that this was probably the best path for me. And so I shipped off for basic training. This was August of 2007. So this was at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. I don't recommend going through boot camp in Texas.
Why?
So hot?
Yeah, it was brutally hot. And I was 17. I knew nothing about Texas. I knew nothing about anything. And so I was 17. I get on a Greyhound bus, from California, where I grew up, off to Texas. And I was like, oh my God, it's like California is hot. Some parts of California. Texas is like another level. I mean, both of you guys have been to Austin. I'm sure you guys understand. It's different. Yeah.
I don't know if I have been there in the summer, to be honest.
I don't think. No, I've been there.
I can barely breathe.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
That's what
I feel like I have a higher opinion of it because I haven't done that.
Yeah. Well, I think it colored my impression of Austin, at least. I visited there in July a few years ago, thinking like, oh, Austin's this great up-and-coming city. And as soon as I get there, it's so hot, and it brought back those memories of basic trip. Like, I don't think I can live here.
Dude, I feel like it's interesting. Like, I guess would you call yourself an author? Or like intellectual sociologist? What would?
Yeah,
everyone's sort of everything now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I did a PhD in social psychology, so I'm comfortable with social psychologist, but author's okay too. Intellectual feels like immodest.
Yeah.
Intellectual.
Yeah.
So I don't really
the moment you refer to yourself as an intellectual,
you're kind of
modern philosopher. Yeah.
That's modern philosophy. Even that feels a little, but
But in a lot of ways, it feels like you're thinking about a lot of the same stuff as comedians are thinking of. It's just a longer form version of it.
Yeah. Oh, I've always loved stand-up comedy, and it's the kind of penetrating insights and the ability to tell the truth from a different perspective in ways that maybe people have thought about but haven't put words to, and to get an emotional response from people. And comedians are excellent at that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely first came across you with the Leonardo DiCaprio, when you were talking about like how women don't like when men are dating younger women, just because it's kind of like their own defense mechanism, I guess. Kind of like that's how they compete, is by shaming men who date younger women.
Yes. Yeah, there are kind of two different things going on there. So I spent a good deal of time reading about evolutionary psychology, and I still write about it a lot on my Substack and elsewhere. And you see these kinds of competitions, this kind of sense of rivalry, and this fear that both sexes have, and expresses itself in different ways. So when you see Leonardo DiCaprio, is he 40 something? Is he 50 now?
It's like 50, yeah.
Yeah, and he keeps, dating a different supermodel, trading them in when they hit 25. And a lot of the anger you see online is from women saying, why can't he settle down? Why can't he choose someone? Why can't he pick someone his own age? And a lot of like red pill guys and stuff will kind of laugh at this and say, oh, these women are bitter, these women are whatever, and they don't understand that men evolved or adapted to be attracted to younger women, and so why don't they understand this? So and they're right on some level. That is true that men have evolved to some extent to be attracted to younger women because they tend to be more likely to become pregnant, and there are all kinds of Darwinian reasons for that. But then on the other side, there is an evolutionary reason for why women would want to shame high status men for liking younger women, because it's in their interest for if they were to partner with a high status male, they don't want that guy wandering off and trading them in and getting a younger girlfriend.
So you got to put a social cost on it.
Exactly. So they're penalizing DiCaprio and trying to sort of make an example of him, of saying, hey, men, you shouldn't do this. Not that they think they're ever going to get with someone like Leonardo DiCaprio, but if they get with any guy who has options, they want to say you should not exercise that option, especially not to the same extent that DiCaprio does.
You'll wear the scarlet letter of shame for dating some hot 25-year-old.
Yeah.
It sort of works to some degree, because in normal life, there is, if you're like a 50-year-old guy showing up with like a 22-year-old, and you're not like
and all your friends
living some crazy alternative lifestyle, it is people being like, what are you doing, buddy?
Sure.
Yeah.
You get some dirty looks.
Yeah. Even guys who may be sort of envious of that, on some level, they understand there's a social norm, there's a decorum, you shouldn't be doing this. So yeah, it is.
Well, there's an incentive for dudes to not like it too. Where if you're a 25-year-old, there's an incentive to be like, hey, rich 45-year-olds, stay away from our chicks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I hadn't considered that. Yeah, there's a little bit of that too. We're in this era of you shouldn't shame people, you shouldn't stigmatize, and no matter how much we want to believe this, it'll still reemerge in different ways, right? We're still willing to shame people, maybe for different behaviors than we would have in the past, but now it's perfectly okay to shame, an older celebrity for dating younger women.
Right. It's almost like the natural instinct is the shame. They just changed around what they do it for. They're like women are like addicted to shaming, and they're just like, listen, you can't do that shame anymore. You're like, I got to get the fix though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's effective way to like level the playing field a little bit for them.
Yeah.
But probably there's got to be like an evolutionary thing where it is sort of a balancing mechanism for society a little bit too, where it's like, okay, if someone's in the family is like a drug addict and stealing from everyone, like it should be stigmatized.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's why shame and stigma arose. These are tools that societies have come up with, sort of social instruments in order to get people to behave. And thousands of years ago, before the rise of modern societies and prisons and formal legal systems, how did you regulate people's behaviors? You shame them and you stigmatize them and you cause them to lose status and respect in the eyes of others, and it's still effective today.
And like essentially banish them from your small community where kind of like everybody lived.
Yeah. You could ostracize them by, oh, you keep sleeping with other men's wives, or you're taking more food than belongs to you, or you're being selfish or whatever, and then you could ostracize them. And in some cases, in ancestral environment and hunter-gatherer societies, people would form these whisper networks and actually kill people. It was sort of
what's a whisper network?
Like basically, like, hey, did you notice that like so and so keeps taking food that isn't his? Or
seems like gatherer behavior right there.
Yeah.
Less hunters, more gatherers. Doing that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Behaving in a selfish way or try to sleep with other guys' wives. And then other guys will say, like, we got to take this guy out. They'll wait for him to sleep. They'll sharpen their spears and take him out. There's a really funny story in, there's this book, Hierarchy in the Forest, by this anthropologist Christopher Boehm. And he describes how the Yanomama, this is a remote Amazonian tribe in South America. There was one guy who was a bully. He would harass people. He would try to take other guys' wives, this kind of thing. And then they were out for a hunt one day, and they passed this tree, and this tree had a beehive full of honey. And hunter-gatherers love honey because that's like the only time you actually encounter sugar in that sort of concentrated form, high-energy food. And so the other guys told this bully, like, hey, we bet you can't get that beehive up there, but bet you can't do it. And of course, he's this arrogant bully, and he's like, I'll show you. He drops all of his weapons. He climbs to the top of the tree, and he retrieves the beehive. And when he comes back down, the other guys lifted his weapons and just stabbed him to death and took the honey from him. So these are the dangers.
Sort of like the original bro code.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I feel like over the last, maybe, I don't know, you probably everyone goes through like different versions of what they're talking about online and stuff like that. But I feel like in the last 6 months, I've seen you talk a lot about the men-women stuff, which is like super in line with the kind of stuff I think about in comedy.
Yeah. Well, it's endlessly fascinating. You know, there's this move in some factions of politics to attempt to like flatten sex differences, eliminate sex altogether, or say we're all the same, or say anyone can be anyone else. But I just think the differences are, ripe for comedy, ripe for sort of research interest, intellectual curiosity. So I've been writing.
It's
a lot
relatable
about
to the 100%.
Well, they're the most
of people.
evergreen thing.
Yeah, it's just like exactly. It's just
Well, I think Louis C.K. had a kind of a bit at some point where he was like, racism like can be like that. You can get rid of that where you have a scenario where it's like a bunch of people. It's like you just have different color skin. That doesn't matter in a group of friends or whatever. But like sexism is going like girls being like fucking men and men being like fucking women. Like that will exist for the ever in history.
Yeah. Well, there's something interesting here. So some evolutionary psychologists they have found that there are three categories that we encode or notice about someone when we first meet them. So we immediately try to determine their age and their sex and then their race. Those are the three things we notice right away when we meet someone new. And so about 20 years ago, this is Rob Kurzban and some other psychologists, they thought like, okay, age and sex makes sense, sort of evolutionarily speaking. You want to know what sex someone is because you want to know like reproductive purposes, are they a viable partner for you, that kind of thing. And then age, also related to reproduction, but also every society, there have been gender roles, sex roles, like how you treat someone based on whether they're a man or a woman. But race is unique in the fact that if you go back, like race as we understand it today is relatively recent. And if you go back 50,000, 100,000 years in the environment that we evolved in, you would never have actually encountered someone of a different race than you. Like if you're traveling by foot, before the invention of the wheel, before horses, before all of those things, like if you're just walking, you couldn't get very far. You're never going to encounter someone who looks dramatically different from you. And so these researchers thought, okay, well, what is it about race? Why are we encoding it in this way? And they basically say that race is this kind of proxy for what coalition or tribe you belong to. So if you look at hunter-gatherer societies, people will identify people based on hair color or hairstyle rather, hairstyle, the way that they style their hair, the way that they disfigure their bodies, piercings, tattoos, all of those kinds of things. And people, like, there's something in the brain that sort of uses that part of the mind to determine coalition and instead thinks, okay, well, this is race. And the way that they figured out that race is actually, like what you're saying here, that race is actually not that important, or what was it, Louis C.K.?
Yeah, it was a Louis C.K., but yeah.
We actually don't think that race is as important as those other two categories.
Yeah, I think his version of, in the joke, his version was like that one of them's wrong and one of them is like not going anywhere.
Yeah,
it's actually natural.
Well, so there have been multiple studies on this. The original study was the title of it was Can Race Be Erased? And they set up what they call a memory confusion paradigm for these research participants. And they basically show videos of people. So they might show a video of a young man wearing a green basketball jersey. And he'll say a few words, and then they'll see some other people, and then they'll see a woman wearing the exact same green jersey, and she'll say the same words, and then you ask the participant, is this the same person who was wearing that green jersey before, or is it different? And people always say, well, that was different. That other person's man, this is a woman. And then they did this with age. They'll have an old person with the green jersey say something, they'll distract them and show them other things, then show a young person with the green jersey and say, was that the same person? They'll say, no, that other person was way older. But when they do this with race, people forget. So they'll show a black guy in a green jersey, distract them for a while, then a white guy in a green jersey, and say, was that the same person? People sometimes, about half the time, they'll say, I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. No, I think it's different. Maybe it's the same. And so the researchers suggest that they're looking at the green jersey as a marker for coalition, and people
more than the skin.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Could it be a potential that they're like think they're getting set up in some way?
Yeah.
That's like those studies where it's actually
Didn't check.
different, like it's a different study. You go, I don't know. I don't really see race.
So sometimes they do kind of confuse people in order to study something else. But in this case, that is what they were looking at. And that study's been replicated. It's really interesting to me. So they're basically saying, like, this is why when you see sports teams, for example, they're not organized along racial lines. When you see someone with the same color jersey as you see the jersey first, not the skin color. Same with militaries, right? You're all wearing the same uniform. So sports teams and militaries and they attempt to sort of remove how much you notice the race and look solely on the coalition.
Outfit does mean more.
Yeah.
Like if I think, just the same as if you see two guys that look like rappers versus two guys that, look like soccer players, I'd be more likely to classify them that way.
Yeah.
I've always say like the anyone that was like kind of around my sort of age that came from like the Toronto area, I identified 10 times more with anyone that's like, looks like me, looks way more like me from somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, like when you watch from like UFC fights or boxing matches. I think there is maybe this sort of archaic impulse of like, oh, well, that guy kind of looks like me. But then if the other guy is from the same hometown as you or something like that, like there are other things that can
supersede it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I know, I felt like it was interesting. Even I wrote down like a few like quotes that were kind of cool, but even just the idea of like what makes a man, you go, what determines like, okay, this person's a man? And you were like, there's always like markers where it'll be like, for example, this person produces more than they consume.
Yeah.
Whereas what makes a woman, it's always biological things. It's interesting. I guess that kind of goes to that like thing that people say on the internet where you go, men are what they can provide and women are accepted regardless or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wrote in that piece, this sort of deep dive into sex differences, personality, psychological differences, and drawing from psychology and anthropology. And right, with women, at least in sort of non-industrialized, small-scale hunter-gatherer type of societies, it was, women, there was a very clear biological marker with menstruation, with the ability to get pregnant. And I mean, those were kind of burdens on their own, where you don't necessarily have to force women to go through additional rituals to prove that you're a woman. Whereas for young boys, in order to become men, a lot of traditional societies have had them go through sort of brutal hazing rituals, disfigurement, scarring, leaving them out in the forest in the middle of the night, bringing back an animal. I mean, there are all kinds of these different.
Heard one where they put their hand in ants.
Yeah.
You've heard that? Yeah, it's like what was it? Bullet ants, yeah, and they have to just put their hand there and let the ants just like bite them and sting them. Yeah.
Without showing pain, right?
Yeah, you have to pretend you didn't.
It's like how you get like beaten to a gang kind of thing. Like you just get jumped in.
Dude, yeah, a lot of these places used to get jumped into being a man.
Well, there is this logic with hazing where a lot of studies show this, that if you're hazed into a group, you value your membership in that group even more.
Yeah.
And so this is why sports teams will do like fraternities will do this. Well, they'll make you, especially if you suffer together with your comrades, with your brothers, if you're all going through the same shit together, by the time you get out of it, you're like, wow, we're that much closer. We've bonded. We've suffered this misfortune together. Basic training is like this. Like, yeah, there is a logic to this, and we're kind of lacking that, I think, in modern society. A lot of young guys, they're adrift. There's no like, oh, well, I guess I'm 18, or I guess I'm 21, or whatever it is, but there's no sort of clear-cut marker like, you survived this very difficult thing, now you're a man.
Yeah, it's kind of like after 9/11, how everybody was so like, just like we're all Americans kind of thing.
Yeah, there's kind of always a dichotomy or whatever between the things where you're like, this is biology, this is how it is, versus like, well, this is modern society, we don't have to do that anymore. And you're just like, well, which ones do you have to do and which ones do you not have to do? And I think probably people got too flippant with like being like, oh, that's just prehistoric, and you're like, no, that's like in you.
Yeah. Well, you see this with this is an example I used in the beginning with the war in Ukraine, that they would allow the refugees, women and children could leave, but if you're a male of military age, they forced all of them to stay. So in times of crisis, suddenly we all understand what a man is and what's required of men when you need to step up. But when you live in a very comfortable, affluent, prosperous society, we sort of forget, what the purpose of the sex differences are, what being a man is, and it takes often crises for those ideas to reemerge.
I think that kind of happens in like a company or in a house too, a little bit, where it's like when things are going good, everyone's, everyone has a lot to say.
Sometimes you have to kill a spider.
Yeah. I have a theory, and okay, tell me what you think of this. I've been saying this theory, but I feel like women need men so they could feel nice, and men need women so we could not feel gay, because those are.
Wait. Okay. That does not feel gay. Okay, but wait, women have a need to be. Well,
okay, here would be. I'll give you like a. Okay.
Ryan does a lot of gay shit when he's on boys trips.
Okay.
You can tell from that comment.
It would be okay. Here would be an example for not feeling gay. Like watching a TV show that's really gay that you don't want to be. You're just like, I have to watch it. My girl wants me to watch it. You know what I mean? For
guilty pleasures. Ryan watching Love Island.
They could be guilty pleasures, but it could be something, like decorating or something like that. You might actually like decorating for Christmas, or like whatever. Maybe not. Christmas is more manly in a way, but there could be parts where you're like, I kind of like interior design. I like fashion, but I could never admit that. So you kind of have to involve like, oh, it's because of my chick. Like obviously I have to care about my hair. She wants me to. Yeah. And then girls, it's the killing the spiders, anything like that.
Sure.
Here would be an example. Like you could see a family where it's like a man and a woman, and the girl's like, we should give all our money to this charity, and the guy's like, dude, we can't give away all our money, we'd be poor. And she's like, well, I tried, he doesn't let me do it. And it's like you're saving her from herself of like nicing herself into homelessness, and she's saving you from yourself of gang yourself into homeless.
Wait,
and
the
she's
spider
saving you from just
example.
living at a glory hole.
The spider example is like she wants to feel nice, and if she kills the spider, she won't feel nice.
Yeah.
So she can sort of outsource that cruelty or whatever to you.
It's kind of a luxury belief.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
female luxury
That is
belief.
true, actually,
Because
'cause-
her luxury belief is I would never kill a living creature, even though
I
she
see.
put the hit out and she has blood on her
for sure.
hands.
Literally, my wife is just like, there'll be something, and she's like, go
Don't
kill
hurt it.
I know, she's
I've
very
had
much
that.
like, she's like, you killed it? I'm like,
Yeah.
what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, don't
It's like
hurt
some
it.
bug in
Can't
our
you just
kitchen.
put it outside? But you know,
Yeah,
she
he's like,
really wants you to
what,
kill
you
it.
think I'm going to take this thing out through the lobby, down the elevator, outside? Like, no. It's,
Right.
it's like I'm flushing this thing.
Yeah, there was a mouse issue, and there's like this elaborate traps just to set the thing up, and none of it works, you know?
Of course.
Just like, and then finally you just hire a guy to come and kill him.
Just with a shovel, walks in and just...
So maybe there's like a luxury male beliefs too.
Oh, I don't know if I would call those luxury beliefs. I think those are that's like basic sort of sex differences where we need each other for different reasons. But I'd never thought, so I've thought of versions of what you just said about like women needing men and, you know, they want to feel nice. And so they'll kind of outsource it to their male partner. But the other one of like not wanting to feel gay, I've never heard that before, of like men having this desire to do something feminine, you know, watching, Love Island or something. And I'm thinking, I don't think I've ever had that. But I don't mean to brag, but like, I don't think I've ever had that. Like, oh, I'm glad I have my girl here because otherwise I would feel gay for doing that. So,
Yeah, me too.
Well, maybe you don't even want to do it. You just have to do it. As you know, so certain things you might have to take this tiny dog for a walk, and
Sure.
you need to be able to blame it on her.
oh, I see.
Yeah, like when someone's like, oh, cute dog, is that yours? That's not my dog.
Or you might be at a bar and it was like everyone wants to keep going, and you're just like you want to go home, but you don't want to act gay when you're leaving. So you're like, the girl wants me to leave.
Okay, that
would be an example.
That's a really nice excuse actually to get out of things. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I could. But,
The old
yeah.
ball and chain wants me to go
I've heard this
home.
from parents that they say like, you know, there's a lot of burdens with that come with being a parent, but one is like you can always say my kid's sick, and that'll get you
Yeah.
out of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there was to go back to the like more luxury beliefs component. There's like there's all these like chat groups in New York for areas, you know, like Facebook groups and stuff like that, and it'll just always be people being like, "There's this guy on the loose that's punching women," right? And it was just every woman trying every solution other than arresting him, being like, you'll see him. He's like, "What if we all agree that Wednesdays is his punching day, and then Thursdays and Fridays we can use the park?" And then finally someone will like there'll be a dude that's just like, "Okay, can we call the cops on this guy?"
I remember I was at a comedy show, and this girl, when that guy was punching women in New York, and she got punched, and she was like literally saying everything, but like, we need to arrest this guy.
yeah, they can't.
yeah. You're like,
Yeah.
she just wouldn't say it. She just
Funding
refused.
social programs or raising taxes.
Yeah, it's like all like it was all just like you
Get
know
him some- get
yeah
him
like
some
like we
help.
need like the Zoran, like the social workers. If we had social workers on call, then he wouldn't have just randomly punched me in the head outside of a McDonald's.
Yeah.
But do you think there is something inherently about, you know, the men-women differences, why women kind
Well, they're
of
more like empathetic,
have to be
I
like
think.
that?
Yeah, there's an empathetic component here. I read this joke years ago, kind of mocking clinical psychologists, you know, the mental health experts. And the joke was something like two psychologists walk out of a bar and they see a guy broken bones, bleeding in the street. And then one psychologist looks at the other and says, "Oh my God, we have to find out who did this and get him help." But I think there is this kind of empathizing component here. So if you look at like the big five personality traits, the trait of agreeableness, which basically captures how empathic, how compassionate, how concerned you are for other people. And that personality trait shows a very large difference between men and women, where men tend to be more disagreeable, a bit less polite, a bit less empathic and compassionate, whereas women, you know, they have more regard for other people, and they want to, you know, be nice and be kind and be, you know, all those kinds of things. And I think that this... One thing that I didn't look at much during, because I was obsessed with the whole like weird, crazy defund the police thing in 2020 and 2021, and you know I wrote about luxury beliefs, I read about sort of these class divides, and so I was unsurprised to see that there was a difference in income, where the highest income Americans were always the most in support of defunding the police, and the lowest income Americans were always the least in support. And then, you know, if you just looked at Democrats, it was always white Democrats, white progressives who were the most enthusiastic.
Live in low
about this.
crime areas, and you're just like,
Exactly.
this doesn't even come to your
Yeah,
doorstep.
college educated, upper middle class, gated areas. I did not look at differences between men and women. That would be interesting because it seems like
women would be more like likely to be victims of crime.
Right. So there's something interesting.
No, they're less likely
not
to be.
more likely, but they're the ones who they perceive a higher risk of probably.
They're more risk
Like,
averse.
oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, they're more like I'm more likely to get mugged because I'm a smaller woman versus like whenever you're with a girl, she's always like, yeah, I'm in more danger than you are.
Danny, do you know a real man?
Yeah, I could see that going either way because women could think, well, I'm small and I'm vulnerable and I could be a target. But then on the other hand, they have that other kind of empathic component, this agreeable component of like, well, I don't want, poor, vulnerable criminals to be rounded up or harassed or abused by the police. So I could see that going either way, honestly. But my suspicion is that men were probably less in favor of defunding the police and women were probably more in favor.
Yeah, that's probably the social component.
Because I've said this before, but because women are considered more agreeable, but I've said this but when you're one-on-one with them, they're more disagreeable.
That's
they're
a pretty
like,
good point.
they're like as a like a cohort, they're more agreeable, but then like individually, they're definitely more disagreeable.
Is that true?
Seems like it.
Well, do you mean
maybe
that,
just the women I've been with?
Like, are they more disagreeable with you, but that same woman would be more agreeable with other people?
Sure,
outside of the relationship?
like in like a group, they're more agreeable. Individually, they're more disagreeable. It seems
Behind closed doors,
Yes.
yeah.
They're more disagreeable.
But that being said, there's something to be said about, okay, if you take a company and you say who's the most agreeable, that might be like the factory worker is more agreeable, and then the guy's wife would be. No, but you're like, second in command is the least agreeable in this scenario.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sure. So maybe they're kind of like backseat driver is the most disagreeable position.
Absolutely.
Because you're kind of a professional critique.
Yeah, and the guy in the cuck chair is the most agreeable, and it's always a guy.
Did they ever catch that guy who was punching people?
Yeah,
in New
it
York?
was.
Yeah, but they let him go again.
Oh, really?
He's back out.
Yeah,
every
catch and
every
release.
6 months, he's back out.
Yeah, we see him just around here. He's just walking around.
Really?
Probably, I don't know.
He was only punching women.
He was only punching women.
That was his main shit. Yeah.
That was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just a serial puncher on the loose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Mamdani gets elected, maybe we'll get a few more of these guys, and maybe they'll just start punching each other.
Do you think he fits in? That would be the ultimate solution.
Yeah.
But it would take some effort to be like this is the punching area.
Mamdani gets in, and then he forces all the people who are the punchers to dress up as women, and so then they're all just punching each other.
Oh. Well, yeah. Every Wednesday, one of them has to dress as a woman.
one of
and
them
takes
has
all
to-
the punches.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
kind
do
of
some
like.
bait car kind of videos.
That's
where
what I was trying to think of. Yeah,
we dress up as women just to get punched.
actually a pretty good YouTube prank. Walking around going undercover as a woman to try to get punched with a Brooklyn puncher.
Wait, deep cut here. There was a scene from Mrs. Doubtfire that was like this. Do you guys remember this? Robin Williams, he dresses like a woman and he's walking the streets of San Francisco, and some, biker-looking guy comes up and tries to mug him, and he just says in a very deep masculine voice, like, "Get out of here, motherfucker, beat it."
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Oh shit."
Right. Yeah. Do you think it's more about empathy or more about the fact that the empathy can get hacked? I think Jordan Peterson's talked about that a bit, where it's like it's almost like the fact that there's this extreme empathy, but then also it's like very easy to like hack. So it's like dudes can hack it, that we're trying to sleep with them, like on aggregate, people with political goals can hack that empathy. Like it's almost like if you're trying to get a group of men to do something, maybe you do it by force, whereas you're trying to get a group of women to do something, you do it by kind of like convincing them that this is the nice thing to do.
Yeah, sort of crystallizing a consensus that this is what nice people do, that kind of thing. Yeah, that makes sense. It is interesting that how empathy can scale in that way. I think one-on-one individually, empathy is great. You want to have some empathy for your loved ones, for your spouse, for your family, for your friends. But then when you scale that up to the level of politics, I wonder if that can go astray. Where you end up expressing too much empathy for people who actually wish you harm or who do not have your best intentions in mind. And so I find it interesting, like oftentimes people will express more empathy for criminals than for their victims, for example. If like this guy who's punching people, I think in this case it was different because he was punching women, but in a lot of cases, like when there's a criminal and there's this trial and you learn all about the backstory, it's like, oh, this poor guy, without really thinking about the people that he was harming and sort of the chaos that he was inflicting on the environment around him and other people and that kind of thing. One of Jordan's spicier suggestions was that when women don't have children, they still have that sort of impulse to express empathy for a vulnerable entity or person or whatever. And now that the birth rate is declining, where's this empathy being channeled? And so maybe it's being channeled and weaponized, exploited in some way in politics of looking at historically mistreated groups, marginalized individuals, criminals, or what have you. And then that allows them to express that sort of agreeable, empathic impulse.
Where you kind of like mother people on the internet.
I mean, it kind of tracks because, the whole like empathizing with criminals, that's a fairly recent thing. Or like, that seems kind of recent and probably somewhat overlaps with like the birth rates and just like women pushing out having kids later and later. So probably like there's more women who just don't have kids.
Yeah, that would be interesting to sort of track that, like
overlay them somehow.
Yeah, like the sentiment for criminals, sort of positive regard for criminals, has that tracked along with the declining family formation and that kind of thing. That would make sense. I mean, one of the things that this is a sort of a consistent finding in sociology is that generally everyone becomes a little bit more conservative after they get married, but women especially so. Women generally, like single women now, are like extremely progressive, especially women under 30. But historically, when women get married, they tend to be more conservative in their outlook and their temperament. And now that marriage rates are declining, I think you start to look inward more because you care more. You want to focus more on your spouse, on your children, on your protecting that sort of family unit, and less so on what's going on in the world. How can we protect these other groups?
There's almost maybe something that's like a problem with the amount of people and the amount of like networks and the amount of people you're aware of, where you're kind of like, where you were saying the empathy is like almost like misplaced, but you're just like, well, there's too many places to places, so you just have to sort of pick groups. So you it's like impossible for it to be on all the right places. You almost just have to pick a certain amount of ones that here's my spots.
Yeah, and I think that there's probably this unconscious desire on both the parts of men and women where you want to signal certain positive qualities about yourself. And again, this is sort of unconscious. I don't think people are sort of deliberately thinking like, I want to signal this about myself. It's more so women generally do want to come across as caring and compassionate, nice, empathic, and so on. And then it'll express itself politically in all kinds of ways. And then men, generally, you want to signal that you're tough, you're strong, you're sturdy, and then that'll express itself politically in different ways too. And I think one reason why we're seeing the sort of gender divide in politics, why we're polarizing more and more, where you see young women drifting more left and men drifting more right, is because relationship formation is in decline. I think basically men and women have this effect when you get into a relationship of sort of depolarizing one another a little bit, where if you're a man, you become a little bit more soft, more feminine in some ways, maybe like what you were describing earlier.
Yeah.
Like, I'm more open to watching different shows and participating in these more feminine activities. And then the same for women too, that maybe you come to understand that like sometimes you have to kill the spider and it hardens you up a little bit, so you both kind of converge a bit more. But if you're only spending time with yourself or with the same sex as you, you don't ever learn that much about the opposite sex, and you sort of harden in your political views.
Yeah, especially as you're saying that for women, because I think for the women version, you're most you're most influenced by the people around you, and if that's like a bunch of other single chicks, is going to be one way, and if you're a dude, I think it's like I think they said your testosterone, as soon as you start being in a relationship, your testosterone naturally just goes down a bit. Yeah. Which sucks.
I think I would imagine probably increases slightly if you spend a lot of time with other men, like in a military or something.
Yeah.
Like there's a really funny study years ago which found that when men are driving by themselves, they wear their seatbelt something like 78% of the time, and then when there's a woman with them, it slightly increases, I think, to like 82%. Like basically,
I thought you were going to say decreases.
No. But probably because the woman is like, why aren't you wearing your seatbelt? Yeah. But when a man is riding or is driving a car with a man in the passenger seat, it drops to something like 58%.
Nice.
Because you're like, I need to look tough to my bro here. Like, I don't need a seatbelt.
It's like you're playing chicken with who's going to put the seatbelt on first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be the first guy to put the seatbelt on.
I don't want to be. I don't want to show that I'm weak. Something like that, right?
What do you think? Well, okay, so there's like one of the, when I'm talking about like the gender differences, one of the ones I think a lot about, and one of the points I've been kind of thinking a lot about is the idea that when you're talking about like crying, for example, right? And women in like these societies are kind of like, there's a big push for like women to be more feminine or whatever, right? But you're like, the biggest part they're missing is like, if they want guys to cry more, you go, yeah, but it doesn't help. There's no like benefit to it. Yeah. Like when a guy cries, it's like, that never gets you anything.
Yeah. You don't get your way by just turning on the taps.
Yeah. So it's like, it's almost like they're just like, it works, trust me. And you're like, yeah, for you.
Yeah. Well, there probably is some, I don't know, some kind of cathartic component to crying where you do feel this emotional release. But there is a really interesting body of research on the psychology of crying, and basically some researchers suggest that tears function as social signals. Like, you're in distress, and when you're a woman and you're crying, people want to come to your aid. Like, women will ask you what's wrong, men will try to come to your help, that kind of thing. Whereas a man, it's much less likely that you'll think of a man who's in distress and want to rush to their aid. And so it would
do
make
the
sense.
opposite. I'm going the opposite direction, literally opposite direction of a man that's crying.
You're gone.
And so it would make
Like
sense
a strange man who's crying. I'm just like, I'm out of here.
that we would be less likely to cry now. Like, we're less susceptible to crying. Like, we're less likely to do so because at some point, that tendency to cry got weeded out, and we're the descendants of the ones who didn't cry because it wasn't
That's so
advantageous
funny.
to them.
Bloodlines died because they cried too much.
I mean, maybe like if what you're saying, yeah, I mean, I have that same impulse of like, I don't necessarily want to run, but I'm definitely not going to help. I'm just like a little repelled by it.
He might as well just be eating a bunch of bugs. Like, I have the same reaction. Just like, ugh.
What are some of the other like big differences in how they kind of like manifest in politics and everything that you've been looking at?
Well, the most interesting thing because since I wrote that essay, people have come out to me and they've said that the thing that struck them the most, and it's the thing that struck me the most when I was in my graduate program at the University of Cambridge, is what's called the gender equality paradox. And the gender equality paradox is essentially this finding that the more prosperous and sociopolitically equal.
Sorry, dude.
Was that a text notification?
I have no idea what that was, dude.
I've never heard that.
Either have I.
It's the gender equality warning.
Okay.
We're talking about it too much.
Yeah, that's GPT-5. Yeah.
I don't know what just happened, man. I didn't like it though.
So gender equality paradox, like basically richer and more sociopolitically equal societies show greater differences between men and women. So if you want to find a society that shows the largest differences between the sexes, you'll find it in places like Denmark and Sweden and Norway. And if you want to find relatively small sex differences that aren't very large between men and women, you would go to more traditional societies like Vietnam or Botswana or Brazil, something like that. And this is a shocking finding because if you believe that sex differences are entirely environmental, and that once you start to treat men and women equally and you start to build sort of legal structures to ensure that that men and women have equal rights, the expectation might be, oh, well, they're going to become more similar to one another. They're going to behave similar. They're going to have the same preferences, same personality, that kind of thing. But it's actually the opposite, where the more developed a society becomes, the greater those differences are. And the explanation that's been suggested for this is essentially that men and women are naturally different. And when you give them the freedom to behave however they want, and they have the wealth to pursue their interests and preferences, those initial relatively small differences are going to become magnified, right? So if you live in an industrial or a pre-industrial small-scale society without that much in the way of wealth, not that much in the way of freedom or options, there's only so many different ways you can behave, right? But if you live in a free society with a lot of wealth and resources and people treat each other relatively fairly, you can do anything you want, and so you're going to behave in a way that's more sort of stereotypical of your gender or your sex. And this is interesting for a variety of reasons, because you find this pattern not just for personality and psychological differences, but also for physical differences. So everyone knows that on average, men are taller than women, but in richer and wealthier societies, that gap is larger, where men actually grow even taller than they otherwise would.
The fuck?
Yeah, and the same thing for BMI, and the same for things like blood pressure. So men tend to have higher BMI, higher blood pressure. They tend to be taller, but that gap becomes especially pronounced in wealthier and more equal societies. And this seems to be an effect of wealth, where men have the potential to grow taller. And once you have enough money and enough wealth and enough nutrition and food, that genetic ceiling for height expresses itself. Whereas if you're in a poor, undeveloped society, there's going to be a ceiling or a limit on how tall you can become. So, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating.
I mean, it is true. Yeah, like I've been to places like that, and you're like, yeah, the men and the women are very close in height. Mm-hmm. It does seem like that way.
Yeah, you see this for jobs as well, where it's actually in relatively undeveloped, impoverished societies that you see women more likely to work in STEM-related fields. And the explanation here is that if you grow up in a poor area and you have limited options to escape and build some wealth for yourself, you want to study engineering, you want to study math, you want to study something that'll pay. But if you grow up in a place like America where you're probably not going to starve, you can study communications, you can study psychology, you can study something that isn't necessarily economically lucrative.
Boys, what a better time to talk to you about Hims than now. And whether we're talking about hair, whether we're talking about dicks,
They got you covered.
they got you covered. They can't solve snoring or blanket stealing, but when it comes to performance in the bedroom, they've got you covered. Take control of the ED with personalized ED treatments made from proven ingredients, prescribed by licensed providers, 100% online. I've been telling people this is a problem that they solved, and I've been on
Quite
for
the life
a minute.
hack.
I got my hair pills too.
Yeah.
I'm on the dick pills and hair pills, man. We're cooking over here. These are problems that have been solved. Why are you on the other side of these issues? Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatments options for ED like hard mints and sex RS, plus climax control if prescribed. So they got something
They
for
got
everyone
every
over
problem
here.
solved.
And you just go on, you make an online visit. It's super easy. Think of Hims like a digital floor that gets you back to your old self with simple 100% online access, trusted treatments for ED, and more, all in one place. To get simple online to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/boyscast. That is hims.com/boyscast for your free online visit, hims.com/boyscast. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information.
Fellas, we're going to be on the road. You can catch me August 22nd, 23rd in Saratoga Springs, New York, and October, I believe 24th, 25th in Dallas, Texas. Tickets at DannyComedy.com.
And you can catch me in Appleton, September 19th, 20th. Boys, I just added Milwaukee after that, Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, Eugene, New York. Tickets are flying off the shelf. Fort Worth, Dallas, going to be bangers. RyanLongComedy.com for tickets.
Like third world countries, for example, just like women can't just like go shopping for leisure.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And just like think about it, it's like that's like they're probably doing specifically girly things. They're not like, whereas I'm sure in some like, nations, just like someone has to go get water from a well, and it's you can do it or I can do it, but it's just the scope of available things that you can do is just like someone has to clean up, someone has to cook, and it's just probably just
there's like an option
up.
of like, I mean, this is vastly oversimplifying, but in those societies you might have like 12 things you can do.
Like there's no
given
spa
day.
days,
right? Exactly. You can't go get your nails done.
Go get your nails done. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're just like,
and there are only so many like occupations available to you, and so you could hunt, you could gather, you can do basket weave, make some medicine, child rearing, that kind of thing. But in our society, there's so many options available.
Would you not say, I guess this is what's part of it where I'm thinking, like, in our society, you would think that the men are somewhat more feminine than like in a Muslim society or something like that, right? So would that not be true?
Yeah.
Like if you think of like, I don't know,
some
like
of them
let's
wear
say
dresses.
places where it's very equal, like maybe like Australia, maybe,
Just like
New Zealand,
Western,
Western countries, right?
Yeah.
Would the men not kind of be operating in more feminized ways than they are in places like, I don't know, like Africa or Muslim places?
Yeah, so this finding, it doesn't track, it doesn't compare men across societies. Like, it's not going to take like a guy from Denmark and a guy from Vietnam and say like, oh, this guy is more masculine than this guy. It compares within those societies, the men and the women, right? And so,
so the women, so the gap.
Yes, the gap changes, but they're not necessarily comparing the same sex across different societies. So you, like say you're right that like men in Muslim countries are more masculine than men in Denmark or something like that. Assuming that's true, then what you would find is that that the women in those Muslim societies are also probably relatively masculine because the gap would be smaller in those societies, right? Whereas in a place like Denmark, even though the gap is larger, if the men are less masculine, then the women are much more feminine.
What are some of when you say it's the women are more masculine, what would be like examples of that? Because if you think of like a poor place where the woman doesn't work or she works in like a, sweatshop essentially.
and it's probably just like the guys also work in the sweatshop.
Yeah,
So something like agreeableness is probably lower, right? So they have to be more disagreeable in that kind of society. You probably do have to be sort of sturdier in some ways if you're in a society that probably mistreats you and that you don't have that many options in your life, and you have to learn how to suck it up and maybe have to negotiate a little bit better, be a little bit more strategic with how you allocate resources. Whereas, if you're in a rich society, you can, be friendlier, you can be nicer, you're probably less likely to get exploited and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you could almost think about maybe like a woman that was poor and someone tried to mug her versus a woman that was rich and someone tried to mug her. The poor woman might be likely to yo, get the fuck up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be interesting to see like socioeconomic status within a society, like in America, like are poorer women more or less disagreeable versus richer women.
Yeah. Good question.
I mean, for men, it seems like more obvious that guys who grow up poor seem to be a bit sort of sturdier in some ways versus richer.
Yeah, and then there's kind of that concept of like honor culture too, where there's like when you grew up in like sort of a poor area, it was like letting someone disrespect you is like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But I feel like the more you like with the higher levels of society, there's a lot more of like, dude, a guy just bumped you. You need to go fight him now. What are you?
Sure.
Like it's that's crazy.
Yeah, and probably the cost benefit of that is way different. You're just like, this could get my ass kicked in America, get sued.
Yeah,
it's just like, it doesn't make any sense to go do it.
Yeah.
When you look at recently I've seen like a ton of articles in the last like 6 months being like, red pill stuff's out of control and all this shit. But like a part of me, it was like, the news is always so behind what's actually happened, because I've seen like lately all these articles being like, this is becoming a problem. You're like, it already came and went. It's already, every guy that was talking about that stuff has already like moved on to doing different things. Like the whole thing's kind of like
Israel now.
They're all into Palestine. Like the whole moment is sort of over, and they're just like, there's this thing, it just feels like it always
Have
moves.
you guys noticed? And it's like, we noticed that 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it's like over.
Yeah. There's this like, I don't know what it is. It's like a social media to like podcast to Substack pipeline, and then by the time you see it in legacy media, it's like, oh yeah, that was 3 years ago.
So downstream. Like legacy media is so downstream. Like even like the whole Sydney Sweeney thing.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like it literally just started with some women on TikTok just being like, I don't like this, and then it filters all the way down through social media before the news is like, oh, this might be a story.
Yeah.
But
those
it's
are
like
the most boring takes.
But it used to be like the news made the story, and then it was like the opposite. It was like social media would pick up on, like in the early days probably, it was like social media would pick up on a news report and then start discussing it, and now it's flipped.
Yeah, more bottom up now than top down. Yeah, that seems right. And yeah, I read a couple pieces like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times about Sydney, and I'm like, these are like so milk toast, like neutered.
It's literally nothing.
Versus like the TikToks, like even if I disagreed with them, they were at least entertaining and crazy. It kept your attention.
Yeah, and it's like it wasn't even you see how they like choose what to, I guess, make a newsworthy item, because it was it's a TikTok with 200,000 views. You're like, there's a million of those.
Yeah.
Right. And they just pick this one. They go, I guess this could be something.
Yeah.
I guess they kind of just throw a ton of stuff at the wall and they go, oh, this is getting a lot of traction. Let's just keep hammering this thing.
Yeah. And I see this with because obviously TikTok is always going to be more entertaining than text, but even comparing something like a Substack, a blog, or like a long like Twitter post versus what you're going to see in legacy media outlets, it's just so much more entertaining when you see it raw and from like a personal perspective with all the hot takes and like even like the grammatical errors and that kind of thing, right? Like even Trump, when he posted on Truth Social, he misspelled Sydney Sweeney's name, S-I-D. Did you guys see this?
Yeah.
And that's hilarious. Like, and he misspells it twice, so it didn't seem to be a mistake. Twice in the same post, and it's just the sort of the cultural chatter. It's more interesting online.
There's kind of there was like an old saying that everything is just like packaging and unpackaging again. You know what I mean? In tech, every like new invention is just kind of like a unpackaging and repackaging. Like, I think the famous example was like CDs, where first there was the singles, then there was CDs that had a bunch of CDs, and then there was the Black House or whatever it was called, where you could get like 8 CDs at once, and then it was MP3 players, and then it go so. But I feel like sometimes the same with that content wise, where it gets like polished versus like really raw, where it's like everyone is like, oh yeah, it's like what you just said, like it's so raw, it's just them, and then eventually you kind of get sick of that and people want polished stuff again.
Yeah, I'm seeing this now with YouTube. Like I talked to some podcasters and YouTubers and stuff, and they're telling me now that there was this period maybe 5 years ago where people wanted polished content on YouTube. They wanted, really like Hollywood level production quality. It looks so cinematic because that's how you stand out. But now that so many podcasts are like that, there's this reversion back to sort of in your garage, more gritty.
Yeah, just
more,
like literally walking down the street,
yeah,
just
with
like
your
holding you with your iPhone. You go, "This is my podcast."
Yeah, and that's how you stand out. So yeah, there's this sort of like fashionable cycles.
Yeah.
In this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I said every new fashion is just things going from baggy to tight again.
Actually, yeah, that is interesting.
What was it when he brought up Sydney Sweeney? Didn't you have a theory on like Simps and Pick me's?
Yeah. I was like, well, I wanted to stay out of like, do I have anything interesting to contribute to this? Because I feel like every take possible was supplied during the whole Sydney Sweeney thing last week or the week before.
Agreed.
And then I thought, okay, well, I have a little bit of expertise in evolutionary psychology, and I kept seeing. I was surprised actually because I was not really shocked to see women, especially on the left, saying, "Oh, Sydney Sweeney is trafficking and fascism and these outdated racist tropes of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman as the epitome of beauty. This is offensive." And I'm like, that's kind of like what you would expect.
Yeah.
But from the right, I saw a lot of guys saying things like, "I don't see what the big deal is about Sydney Sweeney anyway. She's mid. She's a 6. Like, why are people making such a big deal out of her?" And it was literally, like, you guys remember this meme of like the fat guy in his garage, and it's like, and he's looking at like supermodels on his computer. It's pointy elbows, 2 out of 10 would not bang.
Yeah.
Like that's what that was. It was like some guy on Twitter, and it was like a Greek statue as an avatar, wouldn't even show his face, like critiquing like a very attractive woman. And they were calling guys simps, like, why are you simping for Sydney Sweeney and this kind of thing. And so my hypothesis here is like both of those terms are kind of instruments of what's called intra-sexual competition. So like a competition with rivals within your own sex. And so for men, you seldom see a woman call a man a simp. Now, I've seen it on occasion, but men are much more likely to use that phrase against each other. And simp is basically you should not be so generous with your time, with your attention, with your resources.
You're ruining it for the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of
right.
It's like your buddy who buys flowers every day, and she starts telling all your girlfriends.
Yeah,
and
You're like a
what are you doing, buddy?
You're like
You don't buy me flowers.
You're like a scab.
Yeah,
You're
a scab.
You're crossing the picket line.
I haven't heard scab in so long. Yeah. But kind of like that. And so they're trying to regulate and police male behavior of like, if you're behaving that way, then you're going to ruin it for the rest of us. And then on the other side, you see this with this phrase "pick me" of and so no one actually called Sydney Sweeney a pick me, but a lot of the accusations were similar of like, oh, you're pandering to the male gaze, you're sexualizing yourself to be attractive to men. And this is basically the idea of the pick me. And the pick me is like, why are you giving men what they want? You're going to ruin it for the rest of us. Like, why are you behaving in such a sexually seductive way?
We made a deal. We're going to be gross.
No makeup, all just totally gross.
Yeah,
ruining
and so
it for us.
It's a way to regulate female behavior because you never see a man call a woman a pick me, right? Sometimes you'll see a woman call a man a simp. You'll never see a woman call or never see a man call a woman a pick me. And so both of those terms they're mirror images of each other, and they're sort of sexual cartels to basically police your own sex. And yeah, the Sydney Sweeney, there was just so many interesting things going on here where the men who were calling her a 6 or calling her a mid, what they were really saying, in my view, they were trying to sub-communicate to women who looked like Sydney Sweeney, hey, you're not that attractive. Like, you're mid. If you look like Sydney Sweeney, you're a 6, so don't think so highly of yourself. And the unspoken next sentence is, so therefore you should date someone like me.
Yeah.
Right.
Was it all from the right calling her...
Yeah, like mid or a 6 or whatever.
So do you think that there's maybe like a political component of it where because they were essentially saying like this is like a Nazi thing, and so then that's essentially getting ascribed to people on the right, so then they're just being like, no, she's a mid, like we don't do that.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like we're not, because essentially they're being like, oh, you right-wing people are Nazis. Like, look at this thing. And then they're being like, no, she's like not even hot. Like,
that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe
because there is this thing where a lot of times like some behavior will happen from some political side, and then people will just like disown that thing. They'll just be like, no, we don't do that. Essentially, because we don't want that ascribed to us. So then they reject it. Essentially,
that's interesting because then you get to do two things at once. On the one hand, you get to communicate, I'm not a Nazi, I'm not a fascist. And you also get to communicate, by the way, if you look like Sydney Sweeney, you should date me.
Right. Yeah. It's like two birds with one stone right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side, you saw the Sydney, like women saying Sydney Sweeney is pandering to the male gaze and that she's, trafficking in fascist tropes and that kind of thing. And I think like basically they were trying, and they were also saying that that's not the epitome of beauty, right? Like that's an outdated beauty standard. That's a racist beauty standard. And they were trying to essentially
Tits?
say like take.
Also, she didn't write the ad. They go, here's a check for $2 million. She shows up for 3 hours. She goes, what are we doing? We go, put this on, say this, and she's out of there by the end.
Well, apparently she agreed to make the ad edgy, right? Like whoever it was that was helping to create the ad, they said like, how edgy do you want to go? And she said like, let's push it. So she had some awareness of where they were going with it. But I complained a little bit on Twitter about. This is sort of the rhythm and order of her sentence, where she said genes affect many things, like what did she say? Like hair, personality, and even eye color. And I thought, why are you saying even eye color? Because that implies you should be surprised that it's eye color. Like, and even eye color. I'm like, everyone knows eye color is influenced by genetics. She should have said hair, eye color, and even personality. Now, I know there were reasons because of the commercial, the way that it was, they had to phrase that sentence that way. But I think it would have been more interesting if she ended it with personality, because that is actually, for a lot of people, surprising that personality is influenced by genetics. And then, and I wrote a little bit about that in that piece with men and women, and that there's a sort of a genetic component to how our personalities are expressed. But the eye color thing, it was just amazing to me, just how much people were outraged by like that ad. I think could have ran 20 years ago and no one would have cared if it was.
I mean, I was saying the American Eagles like ads into someone was posted like American Eagles ad in 2003, like they put out like some book, and it was literally they were all naked. Like it was like 6 people, it's like 3 men, 3 women at like a pool, and there was no clothes in it at all. And I don't recall that being controversial whatsoever. And they're like just like 6 naked models.
It was such a different time, like because I was seeing people post like ads from the 20 years ago, the mid 2000s, and there was one, I don't know if it was Paris Hilton or some famous blonde woman literally on her hands and knees eating a Carl's Jr.'s cheeseburger. Like, you guys probably remember?
Yeah, like that's the shit Carl's Jr. was up to. It's even.
Oh, Jessica Simpson. Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about Jessica Simpson. Yeah.
But that wasn't even fashion.
No one. It had completely unrelated to clothing. It was a fast food burger. Yeah. and they like made this like wildly sexual, like way more sexual than the Sydney Sweeney ad, where she was buttoning up her clothes. And in the Carl's Jr. ad, she was like wearing like a onesie, like bikini thing, and that whole era was so different.
Well, the good old days.
Yeah, I think like sometimes when I talk about it, I feel like it's like some old guy in like the 70s reminiscing about the 50s or something, of just like, man, those days were so different, because it's literally 20 years ago.
Yeah, but it did come back. Like I think that was what everyone was saying, was just like things gonna keep going like forward, and that's what happens. And you're like, well, not really. It kind of switched, and now it's going back the other way.
Yeah.
So that they were wrong.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the Simps and Pick Me things, I feel like sometimes that tell me what you think of this, that it's almost like it works better for men than women. So, and here's why I think, because women, the pick me thing where women kind of say like, hey, this is what we want men to like. For example, hey, men, like we think this is what you should like, not that.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't ever work because men don't really listen to women when they say that. But I think on the other side, who men decide is cool is a bigger factor for women when they're picking a guy. So for women, if guys decide like that guy's a simp, he's a loser, that actually does to some degree turn women off of him. But if women decide like, oh, that girl's a pick me, guys aren't even like,
yeah, they don't care.
It has no effect.
So it does work when men police better than when women police, in my opinion.
That is interesting. Yeah, I think that's well, they're policing.
Well, because that's a status thing, right? They're essentially saying like this is who has status, at least in
yes,
the group
yes,
or whatever,
because
right?
it affects the status. Yeah,
and you girl can be like, yeah, that chick's a slut, and you go, yeah, she's still hot.
No, that's true, slut, but they don't say that.
But you're like, I've never like. There's not too many guys. Like maybe if you're like looking to get married, but like if some girl's like really smoking hot and women are like that chick's a slut, you're like, awesome.
I'm not saying awesome.
like post 2010, like you guys remember like basically slut shaming went underground, where you couldn't really even use that phrase in a derogatory way. I think pick me is basically slut, right? But it's packaged in a nicer framing, and instead of condemning the woman, you're sort of blaming men. Like you shouldn't be doing something for them.
There's more than a
politically correct slut.
Yeah, it's like there's more than a sexual component to it. It's like a mentality as well. It's like it's like she brings you packs your lunch.
Yeah.
To when you go to work every day, kind of stuff. Yeah, like kind of. yeah, kind of like it's like all encompassing. Yeah. She does all these other things.
Yeah, well, the pick me thing, it works. Maybe not like I agree with what you're saying, but it does influence women's behavior in a way, so that if you call a woman a pick me, other women will pick up on that message of like, okay, well, I shouldn't behave that way, and they'll behave in a less attractive way.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll wear clothing that's less revealing, or behave like, yeah, they're less willing to make lunches or whatever it is. So it does sort
But
of.
if they cross the
diminish them
picket
slightly.
line, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But again, there's like probably biologically like to their detriment, right? Like if they're, because you're essentially like they're all competing, and then these women are essentially choosing not to compete, like almost to a degree, right?
Yeah, so you're taking them out in a way, like sort
But
of
they're taking
turning
themselves
them
out.
Yeah.
Like from like a moral thing, like these women are like, oh, I'm not a pick me, and you go, okay, well, you've made yourself less competitive.
Yeah. Well, you're sort of torn, right? Like I think generally we're torn in this way where like on the one hand you want the respect and the acceptance of your peers, of your boys or of your girls or whatever, but then on the other hand you want a partner, you want a romantic, and so we can be like there's this conflicting impulses, and I think that the simp and pick me thing is sort of exploiting that, like weaponizing that
Making you
sense of being
choose.
torn, of that internal conflict. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, you mentioned that with Gen Z and like obviously with millennials too, but like there's just a bigger divide, and also the idea that millennials kind of got a bad deal, and whereas Gen Z, they sort of to some degree got a bad deal, but like planned for it and are sort of equipped in a way. Like, what do you think about? With AI coming, the differences between millennials, Gen Z, and like are millennials and Gen Z in like as bad of a situation as people say? Like, did they get a bad deal? Is it like a bad scenario moving forward with people can't buy houses?
Well, I mean, they just released, there was like a graph the other day. I don't know if you saw it, but it was like 30-year-olds who own homes, and it was in 1950 to 1970. It was like 52% roughly, and now it's like 14%. Now, granted, people are getting married later, so it's hard to say exactly.
Interest rates went up.
Well, they not since like it was still, I think in 1980 it was still like 40-something%, but it's like really dropped off a cliff after like 1990 to 2025. It like completely just dropped off a cliff. Like I still think in 1990 it was like 40%.
Really? Well, do you remember the age range? Like, is it the same age? Like
30-year-olds. It was 30-year. It was a 30-year-olds
Okay.
Who are married and own homes.
Yeah.
And it's like 14% down from 50-something% in like 1970.
Yeah, well, in 1970, I think only 12% of Americans went to college. So I think like sort of the delayed education also plays a role here, where you sort of 4 years, getting an additional degree, maybe you're going to law school, so that takes you out of the labor force for a while, and maybe you're going into debt in the meantime. So that probably has something to do with it. And there's just like this general prolonged adolescence now, where in 1970, if you were 25, I think you were generally considered like an adult.
Yeah.
Whereas today, if you're 25, you're kind of like, what do they use this phrase, like emerging adult, or you're sort of in this interim stage of not quite
Young adult, which is used to be what books for 12-year-olds was.
Yeah, and you see people like referring to people in their 20s as kids now, and I think that's relatively recent. So there's this like extended adolescence thing going on here, but do we have it hard? I mean, I remember 2008, it was like people were saying that the sky was falling, the financial crisis, millennials aren't going to be able to get jobs, and they're doing okay now, at least like the metrics that I've seen. Like, yes, less home ownership, but in terms of like net worth and career success and even marriage rates, they're not as bad as a lot of people predicted. So, but AI may be like something completely different. Like, this, no one even knows, right? Like we've had
I'm a doomer.
That sounds to me like you're saying a lot of it's overblown.
Well, you talk,
Well, is it over? I think it's just so hard to say, because we've we've had recessions, we've had depression. Like everyone knows what happens in an economic downturn. But with AI, we've had these incredible leaps in technology in the past that have changed society, but we don't yet exactly know what AI is or how it's going to change things. And
it used to be more gradual, like where you could retrain people, and it didn't happen so fast. Like now it's I think they're saying like Microsoft just came out with this, I don't know if you saw that list of all the jobs affected by AI, and it's like it's 10 million jobs that likely potentially could not exist in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I wonder though. Like, it may take a while, but if we'll adapt, if we'll adjust, if
the problem is how fast it is, because it used to be like industrial revolution, and like that was like a decades long period of people like kind of moving to different jobs and retraining and all that. But you're like, this is going to happen like
Boys, AG1 is the first thing I do every single morning. And just like people like to declutter their homes, it's also a great time to refresh your nutrition daily habits. Feeling refreshed starts with your gut, and the pre and probiotics in AG1 helps to support your digestion.
Oh, yeah.
We've been partnering with AG1 for a long time now.
Doing it every day for years.
I actually have been doing it every day, and not even when I'm at my house. When I'm on tour, I bring the travel packs. It's the first thing I do every single
Goes
morning.
well with coffee. Get some liquids in you in the morning. It's just, there's no better pairing.
Great tropical taste. AG1 helps you shake off the lingering grogginess, fully embrace brighter mornings, healthier mornings. It is a way to simplify your health routine every single morning. So I bought this present for multiple people in my life, dad and stepdad. And as spring weather encourages travel, hiking, weekend getaways, AG1 travel packs make it easy to stay consistent no matter where you are. So right now, when it comes to my health, I want something I can trust. That's why I choose AG1 with science-backed ingredients, real benefits I can feel. AG1 makes it easy to support overall wellness every day, and that's why we've been partnering with them for so long. AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, bottle of D3K2, 5 free travel packs in your first box, so make sure to check out drinkag1.com/boyscast and get that offer at drinkag1.com/boyscast. Start the new year off on a healthier note.
Yeah.
Snap of a finger.
I wonder how-
you talked about UBI, right? Like, do you think that's actually viable if AI, because I know it's like really disincentivizes people, but like, is it really viable if this does happen?
Yeah, well, so if we have, the robots are doing the jobs, we don't need to work anymore, and then we're receiving a paycheck. So we will have fully automated luxury communism, right, where people can just.
But the problem is like the job they release the jobs of like what won't be eliminated, and it's things like dishwashers.
Yeah,
and
like, blue collar jobs.
Yeah, but you're like, why the fuck would someone want to be a dishwasher if the guy who used to be like an accountant is getting a living wage, and you're like, why am I washing dishes?
Yeah.
So then you're like, so it has to then be low enough that it doesn't disincentivize the person who's like a housekeeper or a dishwasher, because those jobs aren't going anywhere, right? So then, obviously those people will be like, this is unfair, but then
it's going to be white collar welfare.
Kind of, it is. It's like it's kind of like flipped. It used to be like the white collar people. It was like a factory closes down, and it's generally like the blue collar people were more affected, and now it's flipping. But then you would think like white collar people probably have a higher standard of living, and so how do you kind of like square that in a UBI setting? Because people will revolt if that's the case, where they're like, wait, that person gets to maintain their quality of life, and I'm washing dishes for $15 an hour, or do dishwasher positions become more lucrative? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If they pay the dishwashers more, so they'll still get the UBI, but then on top of that, they'll get some kind of compensation or some kind of incentive to continue in those kinds of jobs. But yeah, I do want, like, if we have this UBI where millions of jobs are wiped out, where we don't have to go into work anymore, how people will find fulfillment, what society is going to look like in this scenario. And one possibly optimistic outcome, I don't know how confident I am in this, is that this will actually help to resolve the birth rate decline. Because if you don't work anymore, if you don't find your sense of fulfillment in going to work, what else do you do? You can have some kids, and you have I don't know if we get to the point where you have like an Android nanny to change diapers and to do all the boring stuff, and so all you do is have fun with your kid. And that could be a way that people will seek.
You're living like a grandpa at 30.
I guess,
exactly.
Assuming UBI is enough.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what that level of actual money is that you're getting.
Yeah, and it's so in flux right now. Like, my understanding is like the people who work in Washington who are interested in AI policy, like because a lot of the political leaders, they're like boomers. They have no idea what's going on. Like they're using ChatGPT to write their emails, and like that's what they think AI is. They have no idea what it's actually capable of, and how quickly it's evolving. So yeah, it's very early. I'm not quite a doomer. I think maybe short term I could see doomer outcomes, but I think in the long run we'll figure it out. Like,
I'm kind of more like that.
Yeah. We'll figure out a way over this.
But you have so when you're talking about like Mondami, for example, and people like that. But you have a lot of, Gen Z and millennials that are just like, yo, this sucks. We have a bad deal. We're more depressed, this and that.
Yeah.
I do understand why it feels like the other side is just being like, it's fine. And you're like, well, it doesn't feel fine. You know what I mean? And then you're just like, oh, they try to show you people's stats where they're like, you're actually doing better. And you're like, maybe, but like compared to a different time where it's actually now comparatively, I'm doing worse than my dad, which matters to
And
people.
I have $200,000 in student debt. And
Yeah.
I can never get out of
Like
this.
they always, I feel like the metrics you can juke statistics to make any picture you want, but the reality is that's how people feel, and I don't think it's crazy. So you go, well, what should happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I think statistics, numbers almost never change anyone's mind. It definitely seldom changes anyone's feelings. But I wonder if people actually were told real stories about how life used to be. I mean, it's really interesting that if you look at across societies, levels of optimism among young people. Richer societies, young people are less optimistic about their futures. So if you look at places like the U.S. or Canada, less optimism. But if you look at places like Brazil or Mexico, they report being more optimistic. And I wonder if on some level, it's not sort of the objective circumstances of your life, but more so, is my life going as well as I'd hoped it would? And am I going to do as good or better than my parents?
Yeah, I think that's the big one.
And
I think it's the better than the parents.
But that's fair. That's the same way when someone's like, well, people in Africa are starving, and you go, okay, well, I don't live there. So if I was there and I had like a job at McDonald's, I'd be like the king of my street, and all the girls would like me. So that, you know what I mean? So it's actually. It's like ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous to not compare to the context.
Yeah, and you could see this, like especially with college-educated, upper middle class young people, recent college grads, and if they grew up with upper middle class parents in a nice house, raised by affluent boomers, and then they're looking at their job prospects, maybe going to get wiped out by AI. Like the future looks very uncertain. Going through COVID and all the political upheavals and everything else, that there is this sense of despair. But no, I think we'll find a way through it. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things happening right now with decline in relationship formation, decline in participation in the labor force. It used to be spun as a positive that so many young people were going to college. Like more people go to college than ever before. Well, maybe that's changed like since COVID, but generally that's true. But then I think people are also realizing like, well, you're spending 4 years like getting a degree, and now in a lot of cases that degree isn't even necessary for the job that you're doing. And so you've created the situation where you have to get a bachelor's degree to do a job that 30 years ago you wouldn't have needed to go into debt to get that degree.
And now might be done by AI.
Yeah.
Like you might get out and you're like, I was just going to be like some spreadsheet guy.
Yeah.
And you're just like, we don't need that anymore.
Although I'm skeptical that people go to college solely for education.
For sure. They don't.
Yeah,
but
they want to party and,
The education part. Okay, so you think about sometimes on a personal level where you're like, if you're working really hard for something, like let's say you're grinding, like not sleeping 70-hour weeks, like, you're just like really want something, and it seems to be like moving up, it's like fine. But I feel like sometimes people feel like they're working that crazy hard to just keep it the same, which is the same way like a girl in a relationship. It's like, where is this going? There's an element of like I think sometimes people feel like I'm working really hard to just kind of like end up back where I started. And you're kind of like, fuck, I think there's an attitude of like, well, and I'm obviously, we're in somewhat of a different scenario, but I feel like in general, I feel this where maybe then people are just like, how about no? You know what I mean? You kind of just want to like flip the board or something.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people maybe feel like that. And I don't know what.
I mean, that could be explanation for the Mamdani thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is that what's fueling the Mamdani?
Also a bit of
I think so.
reaction to Trump, probably a little.
Yeah, there's lots of things.
little fuck you to Trump by being like, we're going to put a socialist mayor and.
But I think what's fueling like some millennial Gen Zs being not happy is they're just like, I'm like grinding to sort of just like get by.
Yeah,
and I feel like. And I think that people point out like, well, your get by is better than what it was normal before. And you're just like, yeah, but it doesn't, only what matters is what's around me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it doesn't matter what someone else's brother did. It matters what your brother did in terms of your eyes,
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's like a thing where I'm asking like
keeping up
what
with
is
the
the other
Joneses.
solution when people are like that and they have options of like, well, try socialism. You're like, what is the other thing you would say?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, I get all, like everything that you're saying, but then there are still like observable examples of what happens when you elect someone who's that far left, that far progressive.
They just didn't do it right those times.
right. Real socialism's never been tried.
Yeah, it's never been tried.
Yeah. But I mean, you could see like the state of San Francisco. Like, so San Francisco has like improved. It's not as bad as it was. They elected a moderate Democratic mayor, sensible person, and things aren't as bad, and they're going in the right direction finally. But we didn't, New York, I just did not expect them to see, oh, well, what happened in San Francisco, what happened in Seattle, what's happening in Portland, and, let's go ahead and vote for this person anyway. So,
yeah, definitely combined with like a defund the police element of it. Like, there's one thing to be like, this place is unaffordable, which, I fully agree with. I believe it's like one of the most, or if not the most expensive rents in the world. So you're like, you understand that concept, but then you're like, but you want to make this place more dangerous? Like, not that it's particularly dangerous, I'd say, but you're like, you could see how that could get worse easily.
Yeah, but was this also? I mean, was it about policy? Sometimes it's really just vibes.
Yeah.
And Mamdani ran a very clever and well executed social media campaign. He had great videos, great clips. He was doing all these ads in different languages, and he's very, he's young, he's social media savvy. Grew up in the era of TikTok. So, I wonder if, the things that he was saying, it was sort of left-wing economic populism, which, can resonate for people, especially like low information voters who don't actually understand, like the ideology behind those slogans. But, a lot of young people who turned out for him, I think maybe they just saw some things on TikTok and they're like, yeah, he's a nice looking guy who's saying things that are helpful and aren't actually looking that deeply or recognizing that he even is a socialist. Oh, he's a Democrat like Cuomo, but he's younger and nicer and has better ideas.
Yeah. And better, and he has free grocery stores or whatever.
Yeah, free grocery stores, and then he defund the police is what did he say? It was like a queer liberation issue. I mean, if you
that's what he said.
He's like
he was on all this stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny because defunding the police is not going to be like some huge benefit to the queer population.
Yeah. I mean, it was out there. If you scroll through his Instagram and his Twitter from 2020, it was weird. It wasn't just the usual boilerplate like woke stuff like defund the police, that kind of. It was literally like defund the police is like a feminist queer issue. Like he used like extra buzzwords.
He's all about all of it.
Yeah, and it's like the worst of both worlds. Like I can handle a bit of wokeness if you're not economically crazy. Like corporations who pretend to be woke for self-interested economic reasons, right? Like they'll put the slogans up, whatever, but like they're still like sensible and they're not going to whatever like promote seizing the means of production and completely turning over the economy. And then on the other hand, like I understand and sympathize to some extent with economic populism of like, yeah, maybe things are unfair and maybe we need to rethink things or whatever. But then like both of those together, like socialism and wokeness combined is like the worst of both. Yeah, it's just, one or the other. Maybe I could understand.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you think are big problems right now? Like I know you said that whatever one you want to talk about, but like over medicating of kids right now seem like something that you've talked about.
Yeah. Well, that was. I mean, this is something that in my own life, I tell the story in the book about how there was this. I'm glad that I grew up in the '90s because I think if I had had the same set of circumstances today, maybe I would have been medicated as a kid because I was growing up in foster homes and I was changing schools all the time. And when I was in second grade, I was 7 years old. I was doing so badly in school that the teacher and my foster mother thought that I might have had a learning disability. And so they send this psychologist to administer this IQ test to me. And I just put in a very half-hearted effort. Like if the question interested me, I would try. If it didn't, I would just sort of zone out and give whatever answer came to mind. I think this is something that a lot of people misunderstand about IQ tests is that if you score really high on an IQ test, it probably means you're a smart person. But if you score low on IQ test, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean that you're not very bright, but it could also mean you're tired or you're malnourished or you're living in an unstable
can't concentrate for that long.
Yeah, exactly. Sleep deprived. There could be all kinds of other things going on there. And in my case, like I had a very chaotic environment and I was changing schools and teachers and everything. And I was also just kind of this angry kid. And so I scored below average overall, and I scored well below average on the verbal section of this IQ test because I didn't know how to read, and because no one read to me, and I didn't want to put in the effort to learn how to read. And I think that, this was whatever, like 96, 97 or something. But if this happened today, they'd be like, oh, he has a learning disability, maybe he has ADHD, maybe he has autism, he has, something, and they would have just thrown a pill at the problem. And, you see these shocking rise in like autism diagnoses, for example. The Cambridge psychologist Simon Baron-Cohen has pointed out that I think it was in the early 1990s. The rate of autism was it something like 10 out of every 30,000, and now it's like I don't know, 5 out of every 100. It's just a dramatic increase in autism diagnoses, especially for boys, but also for girls. And I wonder if what we think of as mental health conditions. Many of those are sort of accurate diagnoses, but also just kids increasingly living in disruptive, chaotic environments of at home, of course, because there's this dramatic rise in single parenthood and in sort of difficult family structures, and then in the school environment, because there's been this concerted effort to no longer discipline kids, because typically kids who are disciplined tend to be from minority or low income backgrounds, and so there's this idea of like, well, we need to stop disciplining kids because it's unfair to those to kids from those backgrounds who tend to be disproportionately penalized. And so a lot of classroom environments, especially in like low income areas, are chaotic, and of course it's going to be hard to learn when you're surrounded by chaos in that way.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
There's a great book that came out. It literally, I think, just dropped today. It's called Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. This guy, Ed Lattimore, writes about growing up in the projects in Pittsburgh. And he writes about, he's a black guy going to this school, and he was a smart guy. He later discovered how smart he was, but he didn't know as a kid because the classrooms were just crazy, like whirlwind tornadoes, and the teachers refused
daycare, basically.
Yeah, the teachers refused to discipline the kids. And so he was like, well, I couldn't concentrate, and so I just joined in on the chaos, and at least I'm going to have a good time. And so I think like all of those things combined between sort of difficulties in family life and then sort of the unwillingness to enforce standards in school is just giving rise to like kids who are struggling. And then, of course, on top of that, there's the COVID issue with the school lockdowns. I'm sure both of you are aware, like, there's been this increase in kids being absent from schools. So ever since COVID, there's been a decline in the number of kids who actually show up for class, but that's largely concentrated in sort of kids from low-income families. Like, they're just not going to class anymore. And then
don't they like truancy laws and stuff in this country?
Yeah, but like those are loosely enforced now. Yeah. Again, because the kids who are truant tend to be from these backgrounds, and you don't want to penalize them and be unfair and mistreat them. And then the decline in test scores too. So there's been a general decline in test scores since the school lockdowns during COVID. But that's also largely concentrated in the kids who were already low performing. So the kids who weren't doing well even before the lockdowns are doing even worse now, where the other kids aren't doing that different. And the smartest kids, there was almost no drop at all in their test scores. So this is why I sometimes call the school lockdown thing a luxury belief, because the smart kids from upper and upper middle class families who had tutors and resources and all these other things, like, they don't need to go to class if they don't want to. And they'll still be studious, and they'll still have all the resources in place for them to learn. But the low-income kids, where school is the only place they can learn, and if that's treated as optional, then of course they're going to lose out.
Seems like luxury beliefs are all gap wideners.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the gaps always exist, right? Like, there's always going to be some advantage to having rich parents, plainly, right? Like, if your family has resources, your life's going to be a little easier. The gaps are always going to exist, but there are decisions we can make to attempt to narrow those gaps slightly or to widen them. And I think in a lot of cases, we've decided to widen them. I mean, we saw this with, we brought up defund the police earlier, that crime rates increased, and the victims of crime are largely low income and minority people. People think about criminals and they think, okay, well, criminals are from, marginalized, low income, impoverished backgrounds, and there's some sympathy for them, but most of their victims are also from the same types of backgrounds. Mostly people rob and beat up and harass people, in like the people who are closest to them. And those people are generally invisible to us. And so, when the defund the police kicked off, and for about a 2.5 year period, violent crime increased across the country, sometimes you would see, you would open the pages of like the Wall Street Journal or something, and you would see statistics that said, year over year, violent crime increased X% since 2020 or 2019. And there would be these aggregate statistics they would share. Statistics, do they matter? Do they change anyone's mind? But then there were a couple of high-profile occasions in 2023 where there was a tech executive who was stabbed in San Francisco. There were a couple of journalists who were shot. I think one in New York and one in Philadelphia. This was late 2023. And these people got like entire articles written about them in legacy media outlets. And it was like, oh, this tech executive or this journalist who worked for this outlet, and detailing their background and their lives and the circumstances of their death and everything. And I just remember reading those and thinking, okay, well, if you're if you're a peasant killed by another peasant, you just get folded into the statistics. But if you're a member of the modern aristocracy, then you get an entire article written about you.
Like now it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's in the articles there are these perhaps this implies that we should rethink some of our law enforcement policies.
I'm not saying it.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. Maybe we should say yeah. And so it was. It was just a very strange time. So defund the police, another luxury belief. We could go down.
Yeah, what are some of the new ones that since you've that have updated?
Yeah, well, I think that there's technology probably. So I wrote a little bit about this in the book, but now with AI and large language models, perhaps it's even more true. So with the rise of devices and tablets, for example. Steve Jobs famously wouldn't let his kids use an iPad. A lot of tech executives will say, "Oh, there's all this incredible technology, and it's going to revolutionize, and it's going to." For a while, it was like, "Oh, it's going to close learning gaps," this kind of thing. It's we're going to bring education to the masses. And it is funny that since the rise of all these technologies, there haven't been any gaps closing in educational outcomes, and if anything, they may have even widened.
I mean, you could even make a case that the paid version of something like ChatGPT is there's all these people who are just I don't have $20 a month for this thing. Well, there's other people do it, and it will just widen it.
Yeah, and also there are, just as there are these cases in wealthier families where they will very carefully monitor screen use for their kids. There are stories out of Silicon Valley where people will hire nannies to literally look over their kid at all times, make sure he's not using his phone, or
it's conclusively bad for them.
Yeah, you only get an hour phone time a day. And the statistics for screen use are wild. If you look at kids from families that earn $50,000 or less per year versus kids raised in families that earn $100,000 or more per year, the kids from those poorer families spend 2 to 3 times. They're on their phones 2 to 3 times more than those wealthier kids. So it's the difference between 2 or 3 hours a day versus 6 to 8 hours a day. I mean, it's shocking. And I wonder if this is also going to be the case for AI, where, if you have adults around you, whether it's a nanny or a tutor or someone who's looking over your shoulder, making sure you're using AI wisely, you're using it for your schoolwork, but in a responsible way, and not to cheat, but to learn. And then if you're a kid who maybe your parents don't even understand what AI is, maybe they don't speak English, maybe whatever, and you're using AI to write your essay so you don't have to learn anything, or you're using it to cheat on your math homework, or you're using it to, I don't know, learn how to cook up some drugs. I don't know. And, and you're going to use it or misuse it for, things that aren't going to help you.
Yeah, it seems like that's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, I think the technology issue is another one. And then this is something that I also write about in my book, sort of defending standardized testing. So there was this big push again in 2020. 2020 just fed me so many of these luxury beliefs, was removing standardized testing requirements from schools. And the logic here was that because there are disparities in test scores based on income, based on class, based on ethnicity, and this, that, and the other, that we should just remove them altogether. But then in the aftermath of that, what ended up happening is that a lot of these universities received fewer applications from these marginalized and low-income groups. And then this ended up backfiring.
Why do you think that
only
is?
Rich kids ended up submitting. So part of it was that a lot of kids don't even know what the score threshold is for what these universities are willing to accept. And the other thing is, if you don't have the test score, basically test scores reveal your academic aptitude. It's an imperfect way to do it, but it can help. But if you don't have that information, what else are you going to rely on to decide whether you're going to take a student? And you're going to rely on things like his personal essay. And if you're rich, you can hire people to help you with that.
Right.
You're going to rely on things like recommendation letters. And if you're rich, you're going to know high-profile, important people who can write.
I see what you're saying.
It's not going to be, Mrs. So-and-so from high school. It's
you
gonna
only
be a
leave the
senator.
parts that you can game.
Yes, exactly. No, seriously. And then with GPAs, all this other kind of factors in the application. And I mean, it's really interesting. Every study that I've seen when it comes to standardized tests, it actually seems to benefit people from these groups. So there was a study out of Chicago in 2016. It was a school district there, and they had this gifted program. And if you wanted to qualify to enter the gifted program, the only thing you needed was basically a teacher recommendation and a parent recommendation. And so if the teacher thought you're a gifted kid and the parent agreed, then you would go into the gifted program. And they decided to experiment with this policy of just giving everyone a standardized, essentially an IQ test.
Pretty fun. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And what ended up happening is that the number of non-white and low-income kids in this gifted program increased, where basically this test revealed something about these kids that these teachers didn't recognize for whatever reason, stereotyping, or because the kids' parents were unaware that the gifted program even existed in the first place. And so they just had this blanket rule of if you score above this threshold, you get automatically enrolled in a gifted program. And so the test revealed something useful about you. And so in my case, I mentioned I got this very low IQ score when I was in the foster homes. Later, when I was in high school, so you have to take this standardized test to enlist in the military for all the branches. It's called the ASVAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and it's essentially tests the same skills as the SAT, so basic reading, writing, arithmetic, logic, that kind of thing. And I remember, so I signed up to take this test with the recruiter, and I was 17, and the night before I was scheduled to take the test, I had to go to this testing center, and the test was scheduled for 10:30 a.m., and I knew I had a valid excuse to skip class, and I was already a terrible student. And so the night before, I lived in this house with these two brothers, and I was like, hey, I don't have to go to class tomorrow, so so we just decided, we got some Four Loko, back when Four Loko was still good, and then we played Xbox Live, till, 5 a.m. or something, fell asleep. My alarm goes off, and I grab a Rockstar energy drink and like speed to the testing center and get there just in time. I was hungover. I might have still even been a little bit drunk, like sort of sweating out this Four Loko. But the caffeine and the adrenaline kicked in, and I took this test and got the results back. And the recruiter, we were reviewing the results together, and he was like, "You're actually you're a smart guy. These are the jobs you qualify for." And he's walking me through, and he shows me that I could have converted these scores to SAT scores. Basically, there's a way to convert, and I saw that my score could have it basically would have been the same as one of my classmates who was a straight A student. He was off to college. And that was the first time I was like, oh, I could have gone to college. I barely graduated.
But in your mind, you're like, well, I'm dumb.
Yeah. I didn't think I was dumb, but I just didn't think the way that I grew up in the environment, I was college was for smart people. Basically,
I'm normal.
Yeah. I'm normal. Yeah. That's a better way to put it. I remember, I worked at this restaurant in high school as a dishwasher. And there was this guy who worked at the pizza station. It was an Italian restaurant, and he made the pizza dough, and I was next to him washing dishes. And I was 15, 16, and I tried to get him to buy me and my friend some weed. Yeah. To sell us some weed, rather, because I knew he was he carried a lot of weed with him, and he was often stoned. And
he's often stoned.
Yeah, and I was like, "Hey, could you sell me and my friends some weed?" And he was like, "No, no way. Are you crazy?" And I was like, "Why not?" It was like, "You shouldn't be smoking weed, Rob." And I was like, "Dude, you're a hypocrite. You're always smoking weed. And I see you in the back. I see your eyes. I know what you're doing." And he was like, "Look, Rob, I'm a smart guy, and when I smoke weed, I go from smart to normal." And he looks at me and says, "Rob, you're normal. You smoke weed, you're going to go from normal to retarded."
I thought this was going to be more like a Goodwill Hunting.
No, not at all.
I was picturing the other way.
Not at all. No. And so, yeah, that's how I thought. It was okay, I'm a normal guy. I'm not smart, but I'm not dumb. And college is for the smart people.
I love how the guy, the stoner pizza dude is big dogging you, being like, look, smart guys like us, we can smoke a little weed.
That's basically what it was.
Kinda.
Yeah. And actually, in my mind, I remember thinking he was a smart guy. So the logic kind of made sense to me. But then, I take the test and I go off, and then later, once I was, mentally prepared and in a position to apply for college, I was like, okay, I can actually do this. So the testing thing I think that's, it's critical. It's important. And then this is the one that's the most personal, and I write about this at length.
And this is in Troubled.
Yes, this is in Troubled. Is the issues around the family. I mentioned family breakdown earlier, where if you go back to 1960, you'll see that 95% of kids in the U.S., regardless of social class, are raised by both of their birth parents, regardless of whether they're rich.
Is that divorced or together, two parents?
Together, two parents, 95% of kids.
95% of...
Yeah, 95% of American kids in 1960.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was the historical norm, at least, within the last maybe 3 or 4 centuries.
But there was
in
like an
Western
element
countries.
where it's like divorce was kind of like this dirty thing, and people probably like, there were like the social ramifications of divorce. It wasn't like a commonplace thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there were sort of perhaps too draconian the norms that were in place against divorce. But then what's interesting is that if you fast forward several decades, so if you go from 1960 to 2005, for kids in upper and upper middle class families, so this is the top 20% of the income scale, they went from 95% of children being raised by both birth parents in 1960 to 85% by 2005. So there's a slight drop.
Not that big, though.
Yeah, exactly. If you go to most nice neighborhoods, most kids are going to be raised by 2 married parents. But for poor and working class families, so these are families in the bottom 30% of the income ladder, it goes from 95% in 1960 to 30% by 2005. So
what's it now? Do you know?
It's lower, but I don't know how much lower. I've seen estimates of 25%, but somewhere probably in the realm of 25 or 30%.
And still 80s?
Oh yeah. Still the vast majority.
So is the luxury belief that like family doesn't matter when it's one of the most thing that matters?
Yeah. There's a really nice book, The Two-Parent Privilege by the economist Melissa Carney, and she points out that the number one predictor of a kid graduating from college is being raised by 2 married parents.
Is that true?
Yeah, by far. Higher than family income, higher than whether you've had a parent who graduated from college. It's just, were you raised by 2 married parents, yes or no? And that's the number one predictor. And this made sense to me because by the time I read that book, I had gone deep into the statistics and the predictors of academic success. And so, for example, if you just look at what percentage of people have bachelor's degrees in the U.S., so we talked about this earlier, in 1970, it was something like 12% of Americans had bachelor's degrees. Today, it's something like 38% of people over the age of 25 have bachelor's degrees in the U.S. And if you look at kids who are raised by families in the bottom income quintile, so these are kids in poor families, basically. Poor kids in the U.S., about 11% of them go on to obtain a bachelor's degree. So 11%, much lower than 38%, the average. And then for foster kids, it's 3%. So kids in foster care, only 3% of them graduate from college. So in other words, a kid in the U.S. Raised in a poor family is 4 times more likely to graduate from college than a kid in foster care. And foster care is kind of like the most extreme and unstable environment for a kid, and that suppresses their.
What were some of the hardest parts of foster care? Was it like a rough one that were you at?
So I was in LA. It was pretty rough, and I think it was mostly emotional. I mean, there was like some fist fights, and I got beat up and that kind of thing. But that was like, it was actually kind of exciting sometimes, like fighting. I was a little boy, and I was also full of anger and emotional confusion and so on about like why I kept having to move. I didn't understand. I was really young, so I was in the system from 3 to just before my 8th birthday, so about 5 years. But the hardest part was, being taken from my mother initially, not really understanding why. So my mom was
what was the reason?
Addicted to drugs. So
okay.
It was drug issues. And that was not her. I mean, she'd had multiple run-ins with law enforcement by this point. So my mother, she came to the U.S. from Seoul as a young woman. And I never knew my father. I never knew anything about that side of my family. So I knew my mom was
Think he's black?
No, probably actually. So funny story. I knew that side of my family throughout my mom was Korean, so I just I'm mixed race, Asian, something like that. When I was writing Troubled, I took a 23andMe when I was doing an ancestry test, and I thought, well, if I've never met this guy, but maybe something interesting will come up that will give me some material for the book. And I get the results back, and I discover that my dad was Mexican, so
really?
half Hispanic on my father's side.
And you went your whole life thinking I'm like just 100% Asian and I'm half Mexican?
Not 100%, because whenever I would meet real actual Asian people, they'd be like, "I can tell you're mixed, but I don't know what's going on." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so
It's kind of wild to figure out later in life.
yeah, I was like 31 when I discovered this, and I was like, oh yeah. But then when I got the results, I'm like, okay, I'm half Mexican. I wish I'd known that when I was applying for college.
Wouldn't your mom ever mention, like, she just would never talk about him?
No, my birth mother, so I was taken from her at 3, and I have no memory of like having those discussions, and I never met her again after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, and also when the social workers and police, like, they asked her, like, who's this kid's father? She said she didn't know. Like, she was that messed up. Like, she was really strung out. And so when you, like,
wild.
My dad, so he was like Spanish and whatever, like indigenous, like whatever the genetic makeup of a Mexican person is, but it was also like 0.3% or 0.5% sub-Saharan African.
Sure.
So I don't know where that comes from, but you know, like, yeah, I'm basically black. And then also Jewish too. It was like 0.2 or 0.5% Sephardic Jewish. So like on the Spanish side, right? Because there's a Spanish Jewish community, and so I get those results, and
you can get into any college in the world.
Yeah, well, now it's too late. But
like
then,
but yeah, so you're going through foster care system, and then you start thinking about, you know, recently, like what's the ramifications of that in terms of, you know,
it seems
having
like it'd be
two-parent
a
household.
chaotic upbringing.
Oh yeah, well, that's what it was being taken from my mother, not really knowing anything about my origin or like what the especially as a little kid, I was too unsophisticated. I would have never, even if you tried to say, oh, drugs, what does that mean? You know what I mean? I was just not developed enough to get it. And then each time I had to change homes, I didn't fully understand what was happening because I was too young. And that was the difficult part. The other part that I think a lot of people maybe don't understand about foster care is not only because a lot of these homes had like 10, 12 plus kids living in them. You know, some families will just take in as many kids as they can.
Well, what's the reason?
Well, first, the system is so overburdened, and there are so few homes to begin with, like families who are willing to take in these kids. But then there are some families that you get a stipend, like the state pays you a certain amount of money for each kid you take in, and so some will
keep them coming.
Yeah, exactly. And because there are so few homes available, it's like, well, it's better that the kid, you know, double up on a bunk bed in this overcrowded house than sleep on the street, right?
Right.
And so I would move into a home, and it would be emotionally stressful and upsetting, and then I'd adjust a little bit, and then and part of that was because I'd start to make friends with my foster siblings and get along and sort of learn the sort of social scene or whatever, who my friends were, and you know how kids behaved, and then I'd wake up the next day, and then one of my foster siblings would be gone. And so that was hard too. It was like,
kind of like prison.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, kind of, yeah. And so then I'd say, oh, well, like, where did Joey go? Oh, like he went back to his mom, or went to another home. And so not only would I not know where I would be from week to week, but also I wouldn't know where my foster siblings would be. And so that kind of extreme uncertainty was really stressful as a kid. And so, yeah, it's a really messed up system. I mean, part of the reason why I talk about this is we want to get to a point where you have fewer kids in the system in the first place. And so that's why I emphasize this family piece is like, yeah, family is important. And, you know, there are always going to be exceptions. You know, I'm not saying like, oh, if you like a spouse is abusive or violent or terrible or toxic or something, you should always stay no matter what. But I am saying like, if you form a relationship and you have kids, like you have a duty to basically be the best possible person. And so does your spouse. Both of you have this duty, I think, like once you bring kids in, that, you don't want your kid to go through that kind of situation.
I read that like a lot of the stats were not as important whether the parents were together as much as that they are present. So like, I'll just say where I grew up, like everyone's parents were divorced. Like it was just so normal, but it was like, most of my friends kind of grew up to be fine and successful, but it was like, they all had like a dad. He was like, lived one street over, and then he had his own family and you'd spend the weekends there or whatever. Is that like fake news stats?
I mean, probably like, the ideal is always going to be like two adults who are committed to one another and who behave well and responsibly and everything. But I have seen similar stats on this about like basically like the number of fathers in the neighborhood. Like that also has a strong predictive power for how those kids turn out. And so, if you look at a lot of neighborhoods where the kids don't actually have positive outcomes in their life, you see that not only did the kid not have a father, but like the neighborhood had no fathers. Like there were no adult male authority figures or people around, role models or people who could show them some guidance or some mentorship. This is especially true for boys, and girls are affected in different ways too. But one thing that I discovered was there's a lot of focus on poverty. Like, is poverty really what's going on here? That maybe explains these outcomes. So when researchers will attempt to discover or uncover what predicts outcomes like failure to graduate from high school or college, incarceration rates, teen pregnancy, substance abuse, like all of these undesirable outcomes, they'll see, okay, well, does the family income, the childhood home, family income, does that have any predictive power for those outcomes? And a lot of studies basically show either no relationship at all between growing up poor and those kind of outcomes, or a very weak, sort of tenuous correlation. But when researchers look at this other variable, so they call it emotional or childhood unpredictability or childhood instability, and this is measured by things like, the extent to which you sort of rate these statements, like were your parents together when you were growing up? Was there a divorce? So maybe you've heard of like ACEs. It's kind of like that, like adverse childhood experiences. How many different romantic partners did your primary caregiver have when you were growing up? How frequently did you relocate? How much uncertainty was there in your day-to-day life? And when researchers look at instability, they find that has a strong and reliable relationship with those unwanted outcomes later in life, incarceration and failure to graduate and so on.
What do you think that is? What does it do to you?
I mean, most likely it sort of rewires your emotional system and sort of makes you less likely, I think, to put forth an effort in self-improvement.
You just think you're like, what's the point? Like, it's just always, everything's always changing. Yeah. Like, what's the point of it?
Become like reactionary?
Yeah. Well, basically, like if you, I mean, this was my experience of like, I did have some academic potential and some aptitude, but the environment around me was so crazy that I'm like, yeah, what's the point? What am I doing? I had no adults around to sit me down. And then by the time I was in a position to put forth the effort, I didn't really feel the motivation to do so anymore. So, I tell this story about how I was a sophomore in high school, and there was this like very brief period where I was doing okay in middle school, and because I got pretty good grades in middle school, I was placed into these advanced courses in high school, and I got placed into this chemistry class, and this was the first class where I realized I couldn't bullshit my way through it.
Yeah.
Like chemistry, I'm like, oh, this is actually like I have to study, I have to think, I have to do the homework. And when I realized that, I didn't want to make the effort to do well in this class or even to pass it. And so then I go straight to my high school guidance counselor, and I say, like, how do I transfer out of this class and transfer into the lower level science course? And he did what good guidance counselors should do, and he tried to talk me out of it. And he was like, "Look, Rob, like I can tell you're a pretty bright kid. I look at your middle school grades. You could do well in chemistry if you applied yourself." And I said, I really don't want to take this class. How do I transfer out? So he gives me this form and says, have your parent or guardian sign it and we can transfer you out. So I went home and I forged my mom's signature and went back and then transferred into the lower level science course.
Yeah.
And I think this is something people misunderstand too, is like kids have a little bit of agency. Like you can put the blame on, the school systems or place the blame entirely on parents. But once a kid has been through enough difficult experiences, like they will start to purposely make self-defeating decisions to like intentionally obstruct their own progress. And that was my case for sure. Was just like, yeah, why do I need to take this class? I'm not going to go to college. Like, what's the point? Like, school is just a place where I can hang out with my friends and have a good time.
Yeah.
So, I think so that instability component, I have this line in the book where I say, if a kid is let down enough times by the adults in his life, eventually he'll learn to let himself down. And so, and this can't be entirely explained by poverty, because there have even been these interesting studies where they've looked at kids in poor families raised by married parents and compared them with kids raised in wealthy families with a lot of instability. So it could be addiction, it could be domestic violence. Like rich families have some issues too, and so they've compared those sort of chaotic and unstable rich kids, family lives with the poor kids in stable lives, and find that the poor kids have better outcomes. So it's not just about wealth, but then I think even at a more sort of basic level, there was this study that came out in 2017, which basically attempted to quantify what is the economic value of two married parents, and they found that if you wanted to equalize the educational and occupational outcomes for kids raised by single parents and make them equal to kids raised by two married parents, how do we make those kids the same in terms of graduation rates and career success? This would require an income transfer of $59,000 to those single parents.
A year?
Yeah, $59,000 a year. And I read that study and I thought, okay, I mean, I'm not even opposed to financial support or anything for single parents. I think that's fine. But I also think if you're a little kid and you go up to a kid who has both parents and you're like, hey, I'm going to take one of your parents and put them somewhere else and maybe you're never going to see them again, but I'm going to give your mom I'm going to give you $59,000 a year. I think not that many little kids would say like, oh well.
Also probably a bad incentive for parents to be like, I get $59,000 a year if I kick this person to the curb.
Yeah. Well, there were versions of that happened in the wake of sort of the rise of the welfare state and that kind of thing. That there are these stories of government officials would go to women's homes and if they had children and if there was a man in the house, they would remove the welfare payment, and this created these perverse incentives of
you have to pretend you don't live there.
Yeah, or just don't get together at all so you can keep getting paid. So yeah,
not good.
What do you think they should do to reverse that as of now?
So the family trend, you mean?
Well, yeah, because it seems like it's pretty aggressive trend. So you're like, what do you?
It seems like once
like,
you get to a point, you're like, you can never. At least with like the birth rate, where you're like, once you reach a certain point, it's like because it takes 60 years or something to reverse it.
Yeah, I think there's probably no sort of one like blanket magical policy that could apply here that would fix it very quickly.
The internet's got to be making it work.
I mean, probably, yeah. What's interesting is that the divorce rate has declined actually recently, and most likely what's responsible for that is that
Andrew Tate.
Well, would Andrew Tate? Would he cause the divorce rate to decrease or increase?
He might cause it to decrease because the guys might wait longer to get married.
Oh, okay.
So
and then they get 5 wives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So well, that's
You might have a few less guys that were like rushing into a 25-year-old marriage that they get out of in 3 years because of him. It could go either way.
Yeah.
well, I mean, interesting. Like the related, like the explanation given is that people are waiting longer, and the people who are getting married tend to be wealthier. They tend to be more prepared, whereas in the past it was like, and people just get married because that's what you did, and then this could lead to more likely to lead to divorce, especially in a society that says like divorce is perfectly fine. But as far as what to do to fix, I think even just talking about it can help. So again, I think there are cases where divorce makes sense. But then there are a lot of the divorces are due to, what some sociologists they call like low level conflict, where people are just like not that interested anymore, sort of small scale fights or disagreements. And so far, since Troubled came out, I've had 2 different guys have approached me. And they've told me they were in their basically same story in both cases. They both in their 30s, recently married, little kid or 2, and sort of new family, young family. And they said, basically, they're like, Rob, I was kind of getting bored in my marriage, and I was thinking like, is this really? Did I like lock myself in too early? Was this the right choice? Started to get bored, wandering eye, like looking at other women. And I was thinking like, maybe I could broach this idea of at least a temporary separation or something with my wife, see how it goes. And then they said, I read your book. One of them said he read my Substacks, and I was reading about it, and basically said like, and then I realized like, oh, like probably not a good idea to do this to my kids. Because they said like,
sure, the wife's not going to love it either.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. I mean, but they were like,
broaching the subject of temporary separation.
Yeah, well, I think they were thinking about the kids because they were reading about, I wrote right from the perspective of what happens to the kids.
Yeah,
but the spouse would also obviously be hurt too. And they both said like, I decided not to go through with it. One of the guys said like he talked to his wife.
Stick with the old wife.
Yeah. And they enrolled in like marriage counseling, and and I'm just a guy who writes things. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not high profile politician or something. I'm just writing. And I think even
cultural norms, things, you're affecting cultural norms.
Exactly.
I mean, I had a friend in high school who like literally she had 2 sisters. And then when the youngest sister turned 18, her parents got divorced, and her mom was like, I literally wanted to get divorced 20 years ago, but I just didn't, just because I didn't want to fuck up the family.
Yeah.
But her mom, like, literally, she was like, I've had no interest in your dad for 20 years, but I just did not want to ruin the family. Like, I didn't want to fuck you guys up.
I wonder if there's an age for that where you're just like, hey, if it happens at like 10, it's a big deal. If it happens at 14, it's not that big a deal. Like, I wonder what
Definitely the older.
Well,
Like,
there
I
obviously
mean,
is, but I wonder like if there's like a magic spot where
I'm sure there's a number where you're like, it literally does not affect anything.
I was probably like 12-ish or something like that, and I feel like it had zero effect on me.
Well, I've heard that there is like certain points. I think the first 5 to 7 years of life are supposedly the most critical. Like that's when your brain is the most vulnerable and sensitive, and still sort of growing and developing. And so
You don't understand it. Like, you
Yeah.
probably just don't understand it.
well,
as
no,
much.
no. So like the idea, I think it would be that if you separated during those years, it would be the most difficult
Yeah.
for kids.
Yeah.
And then, although like I could imagine, at least for. But like you said, like it kind of depends on the like if the
depends
dad's
on a
still
million
around
things,
and
yeah.
all this stuff. But yeah, I think supposedly during those early years, that's when it's the most stressful. Like any kind of dramatic change.
Probably there is a point where most kids are probably like when you're about 15, 16, that you're just like, my parents, oh yeah, they exist. I forgot. You know what I mean? They almost like are
I wonder-
you barely notice
Yeah,
them
it's almost
anymore.
a benefit at that point.
Yeah,
One less,
sure, yeah,
one
yeah.
less cop around.
Yeah. Well, I had this. I remember I talked to I think it was Vivek Ramaswamy on his podcast, and he like we were talking about like if you want to split up, like when is the optimal age. And I basically said, like, I guess in an ideal world, and we don't live in the ideal world, but like, yeah, if the kid turns 18, they're out of the house. Like at that point, the kid's an adult, right? Like you're not directly affecting the kid anymore, so do whatever you want. But what you're saying is like that's interesting, like 15, right? Like, well, what age do you actually just sort of pivot away from your parents anyway? There's that age where like, initially you love your parents, you want to be around them all the time, and they're the most important. And then puberty hits, and suddenly you're like, you want to hang with your friends, like usually your sort of crew of same-sex peers, and then you get a girlfriend, and then
Hey, they go, I'm divorcing your dad. You go, who?
Gary.
So,
Yeah, but either way, it's interesting that is the like such a bigger predictor, because you almost never hear that one. You mostly hear you hear wealth, you hear probably area, like where they are.
Yeah, money, class, education, all those things. But the instability factor is, I think people can be uncomfortable talking about these topics too, where we want to focus on money because it feels safer. Like if you start talking about marriage and
You're blaming
divorce,
people,
and you want to sort of retreat into like not condemning people for their choices and misfortunes, and we just
Money's more easy to fix.
Just
if you're
retreat
just
into
like, just government, just give you more money, and then we fix that.
maybe,
problem.
but it's not that hard to fix. Maybe that you're like, hey, there's not incentives to be getting divorced.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of disincentives to get divorced, so like economic ones and.
Yeah. Although divorce isn't even that big of an issue anymore. The main issue now for what's happening with single parents is just they're not getting married in the first place.
Right.
Like people just have kids, and they don't even know or have no relationship with the other parent of the kid, and they're just sort of completely living separate lives. And so, I mean, I saw a lot of that. I write about how, so I grew up in foster homes, but then I was later adopted into this kind of a dusty working class town in California. And, I had two friends raised by single moms who didn't talk to the kid's dad anymore, just completely sort of estranged. Another friend raised by a single dad who had been married and divorced 5 times. Yeah, so there was a divorce thing there. And then another friend raised by his grandmother because his mom was on drugs and his dad was in prison. And that's like a very common the pattern or portrait you see of a lot of sort of working class communities across the country, and that's very much not what you see for sort of upper middle class neighborhoods where the kids are raised by responsible adults and checking all the boxes and getting into college and all that kind of thing. And I'm not even saying like college is that's like a very easy like a way for social scientists to measure, conventional success. Oh, did the kid graduate? Did he go to college? How much money does he make? Easy way to measure things. But I think even if a kid doesn't go on to achieve astounding success and doesn't follow that kind of conventional pathway, it still matters, like how that kid grows up, how he or she feels. Does the kid have adults around, and Does the kid feel like wanted and loved and that kind of thing? I talked to this kid a couple of years ago who raised by a single mom. He grew up in a rural part of California, not too far from where I grew up. And he was telling me how, his mom, they grew up poor, and he managed to get accepted into Stanford. And he was really excited about this, and his mom was so proud of him. And the kid pauses and he says, Rob, I was thinking about this, that because I wrote something similar in my book, that he's told me like I would give up my seat at Stanford to have just known who my father was, because he had no memory of him. And I think there are a lot of us, we want to focus, especially like the people that I'm around who go to these kinds of colleges. They're like, it's important, education and so on. I'm like, I'm not saying education is unimportant, but what happens before the age of 18 also matters, as well as what happens after the age of 18.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's long-lasting consequences for all that stuff.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that from a dude perspective, you're more likely to be successful when you're married? Or is that, do you think that's correlation, not
Peterson
causation?
say that like the biggest predictor of or not biggest predictor, but like a huge predictor of success was not having your father, which I feel like goes.
What?
I remember he said something about that. Like, there's all these successful people. It is like,
That can't be
it's just
true.
like, I have to find it.
I strongly doubt it.
Not like an overall biggest predictor of success, but he was like something like, because there's something like you're trying to, not overcompensate, but something to that effect. I remember hearing it and I was like, really?
Yeah, there's an interesting book. It's called Greatness, which is a good name for a book, by Dean Keith Simonton. So he was a psychologist who studies like basically great historical figures, and he did have something in that book about how if you look at like extremely accomplished people, you do see that a disproportionate number of them had some kind of hardship, like losing their father at a young age. Or
like a chip on your shoulder of some sort?
Yeah, that's what he was suggesting, but that's like a very sort of niche group. I think if you're just looking at success,
Yeah, it's not overall. It's definitely not just like the entire population.
like artists and intellect, like there's like certain people. I think like he points out like they had some weird thing happen to them when they were kids, and maybe there's a overcompensating thing going on there. But yeah, overall,
I've heard a lot of people talk about like one thing that the necessary component for like a lot of greatness is like a feeling of like inferiority and superiority and inferiority like at the same time, where you're like, I'm the greatest, and also you're like, I'm not good enough, but at the same time that like mix creates a lot of overachievers.
I've noticed that there's that kind of it was vulnerable narcissism of like you think you're great, but you also don't want to be exposed as inferior in some way, and so I could see like that tension fueling
If it's combined with hard work.
Yeah,
exactly.
well, probably the inferiority might give you the drive to like work.
Right.
And then the other thing is you're like, well, I do have this like actual aptitude, and probably combined, that's good. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but in some cases though, like that very same fuel that leads you to success, if you don't address those issues, can also lead to your downfall. Like that's a very sort of classic mythical story of like, you're fueled by rage or you're fueled by something, and then you achieve success, but then those same sort of demons continue to haunt you, and then you sort of undo the success that you had attained, and then you start to spiral.
Yeah, a lot of those things help you kind of like to get on the ladder, and then you just need to like smooth them out for like long-term success maybe.
Yeah.
They're like maybe really good tools for short-term success or to like get in the game.
Yeah.
But then after you're just like, well, over 20 years, you're just going to tear yourself apart with that kind of psychopath behavior.
Yeah. I think, there's sort of stages of life too that, initially when you're a kid, you're kind of dependent on other people. You need the adults in your life, you need teachers, parents, whatever, authority figures. And then you eventually want to achieve some self-reliance. You want to separate yourself, you want to develop, and you want to be self-sustaining. And once you reach a certain point of self-reliance, and then I think at that point you start to turn outward and try to help other people. Now, you mentioned earlier that sort of characteristic marker of manhood in a lot of cultures is producing more than you consume. Once you're in a position that you produce more than you consume, you want to take those benefits, whether they're actual like physical material resources or knowledge or wisdom or awareness or whatever, to help other people and spread that around. So I think that's kind of like a natural and healthy sequence.
Yeah, and there's probably other parts where, for example, if you're at a period where you're like transitory, and like certain jobs like or careers or whatever, there's like a way larger transitory, like, you know, you want to be in a new city making connections versus you're sort of like, this is what I'm doing, and it's just about like drilling down and doing it great. Like those need different probably mentalities as well, right? You know, even like talking about being married and having a family, like you could see a scenario where like this guy works at a company, you show up every time and you're like working the hardest, you have the stability's better, as opposed to you're sort of looking to find new opportunities and you're trying to like hone yourself. Like the more stable you are, the more you might be like missing that because you're, you know,
Yeah, you can't just like relocate for some
you
opportunity.
can't relocate for them, but your head's not also in that mentality. So because so it's not as simple. It probably depends thing to thing.
Well, this reminds me of there's the explore exploit trade-off.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Where initially, like this is often spoken about.
That's a good like way to put it.
Yeah. Well, this is spoken about in terms of like age in your life, where if you're a young person, you want to explore. You want to explore different opportunities, live in different cities, try different jobs. You know, if you're in college, different majors, different classes, because you don't know what you like. You don't know what your own preferences are. You haven't fully learned about yourself yet. And then as you age and grow older and you become more self-aware, then you want to exploit, meaning like sort of take advantage of the things you already know about yourself. And okay, well, I've lived in 10 cities and that's the city I like, so now I'm going to exploit that knowledge and that information and stay in that one place. And this is, you know, explains, I think, like the sort of the behaviors and the differences between sort of older people versus younger people, where young people love trying different restaurants. They're more open-minded. They're more willing to try new things. And then as you grow older, you're like, you know, I know what I like. Why would I try this new restaurant that I might not like when there are 12 other restaurants that I've been to and I know I like those? So let's go to one of those instead. And each, like if you sort of manipulate how much time people think they have, their preferences seem to change too. So if you ask an older person, would you rather meet your favorite author or spend dinner time with your grandchildren? Older people say, I'd rather spend time with my grandchildren than my favorite author. Whereas if you ask younger people, do you want to meet your favorite author or do you want to have dinner with your grandparents? They say like, I want to meet the author.
Right, even though it's a similar thing where you're like the equal shortness.
But then when you ask younger people to imagine you only have 3 months left to live, do you want to meet your favorite author or do you want to spend time with your grandparents? Then they choose the grandparents because now they know they have this limited window and they switch from explore to exploit. And you see this, like, it's funny, like even with babies, I think you see this where like babies put everything in their mouth, right? Like, because for them, you don't know when you're gonna hit the jackpot. Like, you don't know anything about the world. Like, that could be candy. I don't know what that could be sugar. And so they're in like full on explorer mode. And then then they become toddlers, and then it's just like they become extremely picky eaters, right? Like they have their preferences and they're very rigid.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that is probably bad about the internet is it forces people back in explore mode too much. In a weird way. Like sometimes, you know, just like, I guess people say like the paradox of choice, but like I see a lot of people feeling that, and I feel like I have that as well sometimes, where you're just like, it's so easy to be like, yo, maybe I should live over there, maybe I should do this, maybe like it's just, as opposed to part of the probably necessary component for the exploit function is you're mostly around exploit function. You're not just constantly be inundated about like what you should be exploring. The same way that if you want to have like a wife, you probably shouldn't be out at the club every night looking at new girls. You know what I mean? But it's like, if you want to have like a life that you're working on, you shouldn't constantly be inundated with other lives you could have. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I think the internet, yeah, that's it. Like opening up like 40 tabs. You're like, that looks interesting. That video looks interesting. And then suddenly you have like 50 tabs open and you're like, I don't even know where to begin here. That could be debilitating. Yeah.
Too much.
You had like some pretty good like life advice too, where there was two things. The first one, you were just like, for every career, give more than what's expected of you, and that'll be like the number one thing that you can explain it better than me. What was it?
Yeah. Well, I think I borrowed that one from Scott Adams.
That's Scott Adams.
Yeah, that was one of his in his recent book. So this is one of the things I like to do on social media, because like I know people don't like to read as much as I love reading, and so whenever I find something interesting, I'll share it. And then you know, the genius of the people's whose works I share, you know, some of it rubs off on me. And that one is like basically over deliver, right? Like whenever you say you're going to do something, do it well, do it right, and then gradually. I mean, it takes such little effort, I think, now to stand out, especially in jobs where the job description is very clear and upfront. like I mentioned that dishwashing job earlier. And I remember I was, some just like awkward 15-year-old kid, and I just showed up and washed the dishes. That was my job. And I was a busboy. Easiest job in the world. And like easy in the sense like I knew what the tasks were. Like the actual drudgery of it wasn't fun. But then my manager at the restaurant kept giving me raises, and he was like, "I just can't believe what a good job you're doing." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then like later, I overheard him speaking with one of the waitresses, and they would talk about the other dishwashers who had that job before me. He was like, guys who took like half-hour smoke breaks, or like disappear into the bathroom, or like call in sick multiple days in a row. And it kind of makes sense, because if you think like who's the typical person who would apply to be a dishwasher and doesn't have other options, like that's the option they have is to wash dishes. And it clicked for me, like, oh, like all I have to do is like show up on time and do the job that they're paying me to do, and I'm like standing out. And that blew my mind. And then later I kept going with that of just sort of doing the job that's expected. And it gets a little weirder in creative fields, because there's no clear like, oh, as a comedian this is what you're supposed to do, or these are the jokes, like here's the format.
The more you try to systemize it, the more you get off track.
Yeah, but generally for most people I think that's great advice, is just to,
do you have any other good advice for people kind of like in their 20s 30s dudes?
Oh man, good advice. Yeah, I think well, this has been a move for a while, like this movement against dating apps, and probably a lot of people are familiar with this by now, but for those who aren't, I think they really are kind of a losing game. So number one, and this is something that I think a lot of people don't know, is the majority of people on the apps are men. So something like 70% of the users on Hinge are men.
Really?
Yeah.
So the grinder,
essentially.
essentially.
Actually, so it's funny. A friend of mine who he runs a dating app, he showed me, because he has all the apps on his phone, because he wants to know what the competitors are doing and what updates and features and whatever.
So he tells his wife.
Yeah, maybe that's why. Yeah. But he was telling me, I jokingly, I was like, "So you got Grindr on your phone then, right?" And he's like, "Actually, yeah." He's like, "I got to know what they're doing too." And I was like shocked. I've seen the other apps, but Grindr was just another.
JJ sometimes really our buddy will show us his Grindr, and
you get to see.
He doesn't show me. I don't let him. But I guess Danny's been looking at it.
Well, you really get to see like male sexuality in like this very unvarnished, like
it's unvarnished.
Once you don't have
no varnish,
like that female kind of restrictive, like tempering component to it. And it's just like men who like sex trying to appeal to other men who like sex.
Literally,
is just
like
so
some guys just like showing a photo of their asshole. That's your profile.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's wild. Anyway, yeah. So basically, like, I think, like, yeah, it's definitely time to sort of pivot away from the apps, because if you look at the statistics for the apps, so Tinder, for example, women will only like or swipe right on 5% of the profiles, the male profiles they come across, and men will swipe right or like 60% of the profiles they come across. And you see the same pattern on Hinge as well, where something like 10% of the male users on Hinge get 60% of the likes. And so
it's really hypergamy in action.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's another level where the odds are already stacked against you. Like, even if the apps were 50-50 male female, you're already, as most guys, you're gonna have a tough time. But with the added knowledge that like most of the users are men, and there's really like a relatively small pool of women you're trying to compete for, like that's also like
you're just playing the worst game at the casino, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so, basically, like pivot away from the apps. I mean, if you're going to be on the apps and you insist on it, there are probably, strategies and ways to do that, like hiring a professional photographer and all these other kinds of things instead of just taking a selfie in your bathroom. But I think, getting off of the apps and then going out into the real world and learning a hobby, learning a skill, like putting yourself in a position to actually meet regular people. And for a lot of guys, especially younger guys, I'm talking like late teens, early 20s for these kind of guys, they have this like scenario in their mind, like once they meet the right girl, it's all just going to click, and the conversation's going to flow, and the jokes and the banter and the chemistry. And I think they misunderstand that like conversation is a skill like anything else, where you have to get good at it. And before you think about getting a girlfriend or a hookup or whatever, like you should just start like building your social circle, making friends, learning how to communicate with people. So that by the time you meet that person, that skill has already developed, and you know how to talk, and you know how to banter and tell jokes and have the rhythm of the conversation, instead of just like, I'm going to lock myself in my room all day, and then I'm going to go outside and talk to two girls and get rejected and come back into my room. Like, that's not going to work. Yeah, exactly.
It does seem like that is a big problem with like young people right now, is they're just like, retracted from women.
Yeah.
And there's a million reasons that are out of their control. Like those girls have access to tons of other dudes. Like they can date older guys. It's like easier for women and harder for 20-year-old guys. But maybe the other advice of the 20-year-old guys too is if you're in that scenario, it's like, okay, start dating at 25.
Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, if you want, I mean, still.
No, but your advice is better. I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, it's just hard, as a 20-year-old guy.
You take as many shots. You take enough shots, one are going to go in.
Yeah. If you're in college, I think, you should put yourself out there. If you're not in college, it's a little bit harder to meet people. But yeah, I think developing your skills, social circle, all that kind of stuff, like learning how to be a more attractive person. But I think this connects because you said there's a lot of reasons why this isn't happening, why people aren't forming partnerships, and I think this ties into your earlier point about the internet being sort of like this explore optimization machine where you don't know the best way to spend your time. There's so many options, the paradox of choice thing, and then I think porn is also like this, it's like the dark matter of relationships right now, where we don't actually know how much it's affecting. Like the lack of male motivation to approach people. I mean, people will chalk this up to like Me Too, changing gender norms, all this kind of stuff. But I think like alongside Me Too was also this proliferation of digital porn, and I think that's also undercutting because there's this novelty component, there's this explore component to pornography. Because it sort of exploits this feature of male psychology. Which is sometimes called the Coolidge effect. You guys might be familiar with this, the Coolidge effect. No.
Jennifer Coolidge?
Calvin.
Coolidge.
Yeah. So, although it would be funnier somehow if we could tie it in with Jennifer Coolidge, like a White Lotus joke or something. But the story goes that back when Calvin Coolidge was president, his wife was touring a chicken farm. And the tour guide stops and says, "Mrs. Coolidge, this is our prize rooster. He mates multiple times a day, sometimes dozens of times a day." And Mrs. Coolidge says, "Did you say dozens of times a day?" And the tour guide says, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Well, make sure you tell that to the president." And so then the next day, the tour guide is showing President Coolidge around, and they stop, and the tour guide says, "Mr. President, this is our prize rooster. And Mrs. Coolidge wanted me to tell you that this prize rooster can mate dozens of times a day." And the president says, "Dozens of times? Is it the same hen every time?" And the tour guide says, "No, sir." And then the president says, "Be sure to tell that to Mrs. Coolidge." Yeah.
That's great.
And so you have the Coolidge effect on steroids with porn, where you can see more naked women in a single afternoon than your grandfather saw in his entire life. And that is
not mine.
And I have done that.
My genes.
Yeah, right. But yeah, like this is also, I think, messing with guys. So the other piece of advice would be to not watch porn. I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast before.
So you're sort of a no-fap advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like a finger wagging
ideological.
Yeah, I'm not like weird, but I'm just
you.
like, yeah, it's not like I think it's like bad in some abstract moral sense, but like it's going to mess with you in terms of like your willingness to talk to women. It's going to affect your relationships and that kind of thing. And I also think, and this is my like it's
probably similar to smoking weed a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think this is my most speculative opinion. That I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, but I think like porn might like condition young men to become cuckolds. Because when you think about what's actually going on,
there's a rise in cuckolds.
Yeah.
I mean, there
fetish,
seems
right?
I feel like I never heard of it. Like, it was this word you heard, but like you never. Like, we know people who do this stuff.
I mean, maybe the times. Well. So when you think about the actual act of watching porn, like as a straight guy, you're basically conditioning sexual arousal. You're associating with watching another man have sex with a woman.
What if you watch the ones that's just like jerk off instruction videos? No guys in it.
Always a loophole.
Well, the lesbian porn, there's no cuckold.
Imagine but all you watch is cuckold videos. So then you need like you're watching the guy watching them.
Oh yeah.
You're like, this is getting really,
like a meta.
This is getting really busy right
You're
now.
watching the guy get cucked.
You're watching the guy get cucked. She goes,
you're the ultimate
lot
cuck.
going on.
Yeah, you're letting the cock cuck you by getting cucked.
Yeah. So yeah. I think no apps, no porn, and again, like this is just like if you want a relationship, if you are happy with that life of.
Good luck telling that
You
to a
know.
16-year-old
Yeah.
boy. Dude, if I was 15 and
Oh my God.
it was just like, yeah, don't crank one out ever. I go, oh yeah, for sure.
Well, you can crank them out.
No. Yeah, I think that's fine. Like I think like Playboy. I don't know. Like you just like find other like
Just
still
don't
images.
don't get algorithmed by the hub.
Yeah, exactly. Just
And also,
yeah.
like for dating too, like now, like approaching women is probably like this crazy untapped market. When that was, you're at a bar and you're actually competing with all these guys, but now guys don't really approach women anymore. So you're actually like the competition's on the internet, and there's minimal competition in person.
I disagree with that because I think if you're at a bar, you watch everyone's on their phone.
Yeah.
Whereas like,
But that's another part of the problem is
you're not
there's
competing with the
girls
guys
who
at the
are like
bar.
on their phone sitting in a bar and they're like, I want to be approached, and you're like, you don't seem approachable.
yeah,
You're not coming off as approachable, but they're like, oh, I'm here to be approached. And you're like,
her ex-boyfriend's hitting her up as you speak.
yeah.
Yeah, well, this is something I think guys misunderstand too. Is that studies of single women, surveys of single women show that the majority of them want to be approached more often than they're currently being approached. But then guys will be like, well, okay, I approached a single woman the other day and she blew me off. So did she?
She didn't
want
say
me?
by you.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is, right? Is like, this is just useful information to keep in your mind. Is that the odds are always going to be against you if you approach 10 single women. Just because of chemistry and preferences and everything else, like maybe 3 of them would be open to dating you out of those 10 single women, and then of those 3, perhaps 1 will you be like fully compatible with and connect with and click with. So just understand, like upfront, like 70%.
And of that one, 100% of them will still be annoying anyway.
Okay, well,
Yeah. I mean, I think what you should do if you're going to approach women is you walk into a bar and you rank every woman 1 out of 10.
Tell them
You
the
start with tell them, and you start with the top numbers and just work your way down.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll hit some hit pay dirt.
Yeah, sometimes I'll post this kind of stuff on Twitter, and then like surprisingly large incel accounts will like reply guy in the thread, and they'll be like, well, if I'm gonna get rejected 70% of the time, then why even bother? And I'm like, well, like that's weird.
Sales.
Yeah, like that's just life, right? Like if you need a job,
You got to give him the Ted Williams analogy.
what's that?
Oh, he's just like the greatest hitter of all time, and he only hit 400. Like he hit 400 in a year. But you're like, it's like the baseball analogy where like, yeah, the best hitter fails 70% of the time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the analogy I always go to is about job interviews. Like you have to submit whatever, like 50 resumes to get whatever 3 interviews to get 1 offer, and that's just life. Like you're just gonna get rejected. So you got to learn how to like toughen up and deal with it. So, yeah, I think that's
It becomes nothing, right?
Yeah.
Like eventually, it's like you went and hit on it. Like I do definitely think of times when you're just like in the pocket for women in like college or whatever. Around those times, you're just like going up to a woman and like talking to her, and then they weren't interested. It was not absolutely nothing.
Yeah, there's this weird thing. Like
You'd not be like, oh damn. You'd be like,
Yeah, you're just like sulk at home. You're like,
no, you'd be like, oh, find a new one to bother.
yeah.
do you think it's a volume thing? Because like if you get rejected twice, like your whole life you only approach 2 girls and they both reject, like those are seared into your memory for life. But do you think like if you approach 200, like you just
that's
start
literally
like you numb yourself to it?
Pickup artists. That's their main thing is they go. You just have to put up.
You also should be
Huge
improving.
number.
Yeah, along
If
the
you're
way.
changing
of
nothing,
course.
like if you're changing nothing, then there's not that much,
No, but their whole thing is you're like, yeah, just go like in the middle of the day, go walk around Union Square, just bother 100 women, and you're like, and then,
bother.
well, it's kind of what it is, and you're
Yeah.
like, you'll probably get a number or 2, and then
the same way that if you're trying to walk up to someone and sell them, tickets to something,
yeah,
you're bothering them.
Yeah, door-to-door vacuum sales.
Sales is bothersome.
Yes, exactly. You're just like you're a door-to-door salesperson.
I don't know if this cold approach like that style working. I think it's probably like I mean
It definitely works.
Yeah, well,
you just
I
have
think
to be really willing to take a ton of.
He thinks there's a
Yeah.
better method though, potentially.
Yeah.
Which there probably is.
I think like as maybe like an exercise to like learn that you can do this and survive it. But then if you really want to date, there's probably like better uses of like either building hobbies.
Cold calling's not the only way to make sales.
Or like what is it like? What do they call like warm approaches or like warm connections or whatever it is of like friends of friends.
That's
like
probably the
basically,
best
like,
one.
Improve yourself.
Yeah, like
to
when
the
you're in a
point.
social group and you're like you've already been somewhat vetted as like
Yeah.
not some stranger on the street. You're like,
Number one way to get hot girls is to be around like places where women like.
Okay.
Like the guy who's like the number one like suave dude that girls love is still not going to get half as many girls as a guy who's Drake's friend. Just like around where the women are. You know what I mean?
So make friends with a celebrity.
Yeah, they don't have to be a celebrity though. It could be like, it might just be like there's a million people that aren't celebrities that like women are around. Like, when you think about people that are 17, like or 14, like money doesn't even matter. Like, no one in high school is like, oh, that guy has money. Like it just is irrelevant, So no one's a celebrity. It was just, there's places where girls are. So, and I'm not saying that's the only way, but my point was that those things matter so much more. Like being around where women are.
Yeah. Just putting yourself in the right environment.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
The same as like when I say, how do you get like a guy to buy your company in Silicon Valley? Like, well, first of all, you need to be around those people.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. Like that's useful to know too. Is like just geography. So gender ratios matter a lot too. Like this is something that every like doorman at a frat party knows, or every bouncer at a nightclub is gender ratios matter. And so you can look up like where do you want to live. Like actually New York is great for dating if you're a man, because if you look at what is it, something like if you look at the number of people under the age of 30 with bachelor's degrees, so women tend to want to date men who are sort of equally or high or more educated than themselves. So for people under 30 with bachelor's degrees, the male to female gender skew, it's something like 3 women for every 2 men.
Wow.
Something like that. So as a man, the odds are in your favor. Whereas in San Francisco, it's literally the opposite. Because it's the tech capital.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be a lot of guys, and something like I think 12% of men in Silicon Valley are millionaires, and so the competition is really really tough because there's already a lot of guys, and then a lot of them are going to be very successful, and relatively small pool of women. Whereas places like New York and DC are the opposite, where there's a surplus of women relative to men. So this is something else to keep in mind. And then this is why college is great too, as a guy, that some psychologists have speculated that right around the time that women broke that 50% mark and became the majority of students on college
Became a
campuses.
pussy fest?
well, that's when hookup culture took off. Because it was right around the late 90s and early 2000s that women surpassed that 50% mark on college campuses, and then hookup culture skyrocketed because if you are the scarcer sex, you get to basically like call the shots, right? Like because you're the scarce resource, and the opposite sex are going to be competing for you. And you see the opposite pattern and the relatively few college campuses where men outnumber women. So places like Caltech, where there are more men than there are women, there's much less hookup culture and more long-term relationships.
Is that true? Interesting. That's very super interesting.
Yeah, because there are more guys, right? So they're trying to adjust their behavior to be what the women want. Yeah.
Seller's market for women.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I do feel like one of the reasons why this stuff's even interesting, even if you're like older or married or whatever, is because it's like it's really everything comes down to like seduction at the end of the day. Like, whether your sales, like you're like if you're writing a book, like you're trying to essentially do it's all the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, you getting along with people and being likable and well regarded, and that kind of thing. So no, I think that's right. Yeah.
And this is the last thing. What is in today's day and age, when like everything moves so quick and you're writing, you're tweeting, you're putting stuff on the internet, do you find it difficult to block yourself off and write a book?
Not really. I'm relatively, fortunate or whatever that I have like pretty good attention span if I'm interested in the thing that I'm doing. So when I was writing this book, I was also writing my PhD thesis, and I was building a newsletter, which I eventually put on Substack. And during that period, so this was basically grad school, 2020 to 2022-ish, when I was doing this, I was able to sort of confine my time. I'm going to do this for these hours, this for that, and whatever. I don't really get that sucked into social media or the algorithm.
Do you post it and then not look?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll do that. No, I don't say I won't look, but I'll like wait. I have some time from 3:30 to 4. I can screw around on social media for that half hour, and so I'll
put it down.
Yeah. And then I'll like check what are the comments, what are people saying, and then I'll put it away. And so it's not that difficult for me.
Do you turn your phone off? Do you turn, like when you're writing, do you turn everything off?
I'll put it in airplane mode and put it in another room, but I don't turn it off.
And is your computer on the internet?
Yeah. I don't need like... you
don't have to do any of that stuff.
Like the cold turkey apps and cutting off from Wi-Fi. I'm not like that. And yeah, I've just never had that much of a difficulty.
It sort of
with
sometimes
concentration.
helps, like
Yeah.
also to maybe have like a big project that's like underscoring everything you're doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that too. So yeah, it's but I get like for some people that they have to create all these tricks. Like I know people who will buy these like lock boxes for their
I have
phone.
He does that.
Oh, you have
I
that?
have the
Yeah.
cookie box.
Oh, is it that? Okay, it's a cookie box.
They call it. It's like a.
He doesn't have porn. He just has one photo of a naked girl.
I have cookies in there actually. That's where the sweets go.
Yeah. Well, I think like, yeah, it's great though. Like all these methods, like I put my phone across the room from me when I go to sleep. Like I try to like take steps so that I know just in case. Like I back when I used to sleep with my phone next to me, I would check it in the middle of the night. Like I'd get bored, I'd wake up, I'd go to the bathroom, oh, let me see what's going on, and then suddenly 4 hours goes by. So I have like that I understand that, but when I have like a big project and I care about it, and I can usually find ways to focus in that way. But yeah, I think like kids now, it's just so hard. Like if you grow up with this technology, like what's it even?
And we have no idea because they're essentially the guinea pigs on what it's like being raised with all this stuff.
Yeah. And this book, I submitted the manuscript, the final draft. This was, I think, October of 2022. And then a month later, ChatGPT comes out. So what I tell people is Troubled is the last non-AI book, like no
Right.
AI
Yeah.
whatsoever. It wasn't even a thing yet. And now I talk to authors, and there's just, to your earlier point, like the doomer perspective. I know a lot of writers who were like, we're going to be out of a job. Like,
I mean, just
AI
the college
taking
stuff,
over.
like unless they
He's
figure
the
out-
ultimate doomer.
I am a doomer, but just the college stuff, like for them to, if you're a teacher, like unless they come out with these amazing ways where you can, like you said, where you can test to see if this is written on AI. Like
Yeah.
when I was in college, like I would have for sure written some paper I didn't give a shit about on AI. I would have 100% done that.
Yeah. The professors, everyone's just like, what's gonna happen next? But no, I've always enjoyed writing, and so this is something I've been thinking about. Is maybe I'll have to pivot away and start going up to people with my hat in my hand and asking for UBI or whatever. So.
Hell yeah. Troubled, and where do people find it mainly?
Anywhere you get your books. Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class.
Hell yeah. Do you have
Cool.
anything?
No.
Okay.
That was
Thanks
great.
a lot, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Johnny.